Howdy, howdy, howdy. I'm Stephen Grenade. Let's play some interactive fiction. Today I'm going to be playing through Heretic's Hope by Grimm. Heretic's Hope took 5th place in the 2019 interactive fiction competition. It's a really interesting choice-based game. I'm excited for y'all to get to see it. One of the things that really sets Grimm's work apart from a lot of others is the thought and care that goes into the interface. They're written in Twine, and a lot of people I've shown them to find that surprising just because of how polished they look and how the interface is put together. One of the things that I'll recommend is, if you're interested in that kind of thing, Grimm has a Patreon that where they're working through a lot of those tutorials, going through various ways of adjusting Twine. I'll drop those in chat. And for folks coming in later, I will add them to the video description. So rather than hear me continue to blather on, let's go ahead and start. 1. Grave Dirt. It was not certain what significance the ceremony held, but the formality was no less sacred for it being unintelligible. Mervyn Peake, Titus Groan. You are the only human left. A month has passed and there is still dirt lodged beneath your nails. You spend too much of your time doubled over at the grave, stricken and lonely, reliving the night you buried your mother. The pain, too, has gotten worse. It is like a living thing, growing day by day within you. Much of it is grief, a new and debilitating hurt you've never known before and cannot fathom how to heal. But much of it is an old, forgotten pain as well. You are alone now, and it has found you again. There is nowhere else to turn. That is a heck of an opening. Oh my gosh. So good. Deirdre was Her Excellency's chief interpreter. All right, so one of the things that I appreciate about this interface is that cycling links are set off like this, where you can choose among the options and sort of shape what the story is. So we have the chief interpreter, a woman from elsewhere, I like the caps, or your mother. For as long as you can remember, you lived here with her, 2 humans among the Prospero, a society of insects and arachnids, so mutated in size and intellect that their ambition drove them to conquer the remote island of Acthoven many years ago. Humans who die in the superstitious court of the Prospero are never to be buried. They are only burned, or embalmed, or they disappear, discarded and swallowed by the dark currents of the sea surrounding Acthoven. You did not want that for her, so you dug the grave yourself 1 month ago, staring into the soil all the while, as if you could part it with your grief alone. Mother would not have asked you to bury her. She did not want to burden you with such a task as that, but you carried that burden the same way you carried her cold body into the gardens, with love. Let's see. Interesting. All right. There is only one God, so say the Prospero, and it dwells underfoot. Its flowers bloom on land, its limbs reach for the heretic salt of the oversea, its roots delve through the earth of Acthoven and into the great dark waters below. You are not permitted to cut flowers to bring to your mother's grave, for all that grows in God's garden is holy. Instead, you bring all else you have to offer, stories and prayers. Come back to that in a second. You are sitting at your mother's unmarked resting place, noting the soft blue grass that has begun to sprout along the edges of the disturbed earth, when you hear someone approaching. There are no footfalls to mark their progress, only a low, droning buzz and the papery beat of wings growing louder as they grow nearer. You know that sound all too well. So other than stories, we could bring memories, we can bring company. Let's bring memories and prayers, care, or protection. Prayers. That feels right to me somehow. His Holiness, Pontiff Opalescent, hovers behind you, his great height and mass undercut by the delicate thinness of his limbs and the fragility of his wings, which look so sheer as to be unable to carry him. Yet they do, strong beyond reckoning, and the sound of them beating is as low and dire as his voice, frayed with a sonorous hum of irritation. Opalescent has never favored you, and of late he has less patience with you than ever. Her Excellency is calling you, Esser. Do not keep her waiting, I bid you begone. So we have the choices that we can make and the general effect that they have, which I really appreciate. So I'm curious if chat folks, do we want to agree or refuse or question? I lean a little bit towards questioning just to get a little more information about the world, but I could certainly be convinced otherwise if there are folks in the stream who have strong feelings. I also really appreciate the illustrations to give some imagery to go along with this, and the sense of place. This really does a lot to convey along with the language, what's going on and what the world is like. Let's see. They're upset with me. Ah, do I seem angry? Why might that be? Ha! Perhaps because you've defiled our holy ground with death and rot. You've desecrated this terrace. Apocrita twitches in outrage, each of his golden legs tensing. His jaws snap, and the pitch of his wing beats seems to take a sharp upward turn. I really don't want him to dig her up, so please don't dig her up. And violate our sacred land further? You needn't worry about that. Oh, you've backed me into quite a corner with this little trick, haven't you? No, I shall have nothing more to do with the thing. As if I would wish to deal in dead humans. Ridiculous. Appalling. Ha! Leave now before Her Excellency grows as impatient with you as I have. You do as he asks, but you feel some satisfaction in knowing that your mother cannot be disturbed. You no longer need to guard her resting place night and day. Thank goodness. Not even the Pontiff has the authority to exhume her. When he hisses a final, deflated-sounding "begone" your way, you wonder who he is really speaking to, you or Deirdre. No matter your reasons for doing it, you committed a crime against Achtoven when you dug the grave. You know this, and you do not expect Apocrita to forgive you, or Her Excellency. Yet if she were as deeply offended, you doubt you'd have lived long enough to apologize. You have few regrets. Though her apparent clemency is appreciated, you understand all too well that grief is unacceptable here. Your obvious grief makes you unfit. Embracing it as you have can only mark you as frail and pathetic, worse than the simple worm. Ugh, I don't like that. The worm at least serves God. The worm carves God's soil, churns nutrients for God's roots. The worm, mindless and voiceless, understands that each of its 5 hearts beats for God alone. This is what you're meant to believe. The Prosperos say that God will organize the world into a haven of... sap and blood. And it begins here with Achtoven. You've nowhere else to go. It's always been in your best interests to play along. When you listen closely, you hear her call ringing through the air from afar. You had not noticed it before, stifled by the buzz of Apocrita's frustration, the rush of blood in your head, the wailing grief growing louder by the day in your mind. You must not keep her waiting. Heads and eye stalks turn in your direction as you hurry through the chapels and into Her Excellency's dwelling. Cleaners scuttle behind you, minding the dirt you've tracked across the hive's polished floors. You do not care. In another life you would have cared, and it would have bothered you that you do not. But it feels as though that life has fled from you, flaking and sloughing away in great lengths like a skin being shed. Good image. Her Excellency's call is piercing in the walls of her spire, where it travels through hallways and stairwells as if on foot. It is a low, buzzing frequency that rattles the small bones of your ears, and it is tailored to summon you alone. This is her word for you, spoken in a wordless tongue by a tongueless maul. Aides and minders race to meet you at the audience chamber entrance. They crank the doors open, and like a strange accordion or a graceful fan, they fold apart to grant you entrance. Man, I love the language in this. The voice traveling as if on foot, lovely image. Her chambers are dim and crowded with members of the court who fall silent at your approach. These are the patrician Prospero, larger and more cunning than the serving classes. They are permitted entrance into the inner sanctum of the hive. Though this castle was built by humans, it has been refined by the Prospero to accommodate their ways. Her enormity is concealed behind a large and ornate screen, though you can make out her shadow. Many-limbed, heavy with vitality, adorned with a morbid crown. The droning summons ceases as you enter, and though you cannot see her excellency, you know when she looks at you, for the gaze of her faceted eyes is piercing. Let's show some respect. You clasp your hands before you. Her Excellency says, "Child of woman, kith of our kind, I absolve you now of your sins. To mark our continued friendship, I have designed for you a special task. Come closer." Approaching slowly, you are aware of the myriad eyes of the court upon you. Though you have shown Her Excellency nothing but the respect and deference you've been taught is her due, many of her courtiers still seem to regard you with suspicion. You are not like them. It is as simple as that. You are an oddity to the Prospero, through and through. You refuse to call yourself male or female. You cannot eat or sing or move as they do. You are fully grown, and yet your body is frail like a grub or a larva, burdened by its own flesh, and lacking any carapace to make you durable. Among such creatures as these, it is you who risks being crushed underfoot. Your honored mother was of great use to me, foremost among my interpreters. You may act as such in her stead when I require it, but I have found another use for you, child, a grander one. You are to be my new pontiff. Goodness, found another use, like a tool. Noises of shock and outrage ripple through the assembled court. Legs rub together anxiously, singing piercing refrains of apprehension. Wings beat furiously, mandibles clatter in voiceless whispers. Few are brave enough to speak aloud, and their unbearable silence screams through the dead air. "But this is a human!" someone cries at last. Emboldened, another voice demands, "What of Pontiff Apocryta?" Well, this should go well. "Apocryta knows of the change. Do you question me, my humble court?" Silence falls, broken only with bursts of obsequious protest. "Of course not, your magnificence." Apocryta knows. All at once, you understand his renewed hostility. He was never particularly warm or kind. He has always been known throughout the court for his voluptuous nature and short temper. But you see now what has incensed him so. Without meaning to, you have stolen something very dear from him. I quibble about the stolen. It was kind of forced upon us. "Well, Pontiff Esser, what say you?" Though you cannot see more than Her Excellency's silhouette behind the ornate screen, you can feel her scrutiny, the unbearable weight of her expectations pressing down upon you. As she leans towards you, you hear the jingling of golden bangles and note the shadow of her fabled crown, a blade buried to its hilt in her head. Oh my goodness. Buried in her head. The weapon that once failed to kill her now worn forever as a trophy. Goodness. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to doubt her. I'm going to protest just a little, yet I have no experience, Your Magnificence. Then you will gain it, won't you, my dear? Each of us learns their place. Let it be known to all of Actovan, this is your new pontiff. Be at ease, for their holiness shall soon swear their vow to our faith. You thought you knew your place until now. Your place was anywhere out of the way, anywhere your presence would not interfere too gravely. You lived in peace among these creatures, all of whom knew of you, but few of whom desired to know too much. And it was good. Now, thrust into a position of such scrutiny, you feel as though the ground is crumbling beneath you. You wish the great sea would swallow you and be done with it. Her Excellency lowers her voice to address you once more. You'll begin presently. I will have you lead tonight's Vespers. Do as you will until then. I tire now, and I've no more to say. Meet with someone among my synod if you require guidance. As the courtiers clear out in a skittering of limbs, all gossiping amongst themselves, you are led out of her chambers and into the anteroom. Here, only 3 courtiers remain, 3/4 of the Queen's Synod, her most trusted attendants. The former 4th member of the Synod is not present. He is in the garden, glaring at your mother's grave. You have replaced him. Sorry about that. There is Dux Harpactor, the assassin bug renowned for her bloody achievements as well as her rough charisma. Beside her stands Magister Mantadia, the genial but secretive pedagogue, a mantis. His celibacy has long allowed him to keep his head. Behind the pair is Signifer Olivalis, the multiple standard bearer, whose upright posture and massive eyes give her the appearance of barely containing an inquisitive nature at all times. You have known them all since you were 10 years old, though you admit you still do not know them well. There is no time like the present, of course. At Her Excellency's behest, you must confer with one of these esteemed retainers. You have the opportunity now to speak with them alone. This is an interesting decision to come to. I lean away from Dux Harpactor. The assassin bug just doesn't vibe with me, necessarily. Magister Mantodia, I think, is the way I'm going to go for this one. And I like the indication of which one you are mousing over to make sure that you are clear what you are clicking. I appreciate that. Is this something you desired, Esser? Drawn up to his full height, Mantodia is so tall that you must crane your neck to see his face. Obligingly, he takes a step back and lowers his long body to glance down at you, tilting his head this way and that. I'm going to tell the truth and see how this goes. No, why choose me? I would not presume her motives. If she sees something in you that you've been blind to, you must open your eyes. The Magister dips his head in thought, extending his long forelimbs until they touch the floor. You know by the tone of his voice that in this one matter he is far from impartial. He believes in Her Excellency's esteem above all else. A word of advice, Pontiff. Do not let this elevation in status change your nature. Grow prideful and become sinful, but remain humble and be holy. It's not only a matter of God, but of your own safety. I trust you understand. You do. His forelegs twitch higher, forever poised in the position of prayer, and he regards you with unblinking, bulbous eyes. You nod and bend forward in a bow, but when you rise, you find that he has already turned away, having said all he wished to say. That was the briefest bit of mentoring. The Magister turns and takes his leave of the anteroom. For one precious moment you are alone and you savor that solitude. But it does not last long. Within minutes, the bell above the hive begins to chime. You feel its resonance in the tower's walls before the sound can make its way to your ears. It is a familiar sensation, but it has taken on a new meaning. Where it once was merely a way you marked the time, it is now your signal to begin your new duties. When you emerge from the anteroom, Mantodia is nowhere to be found. A small gathering of Prospero, juveniles of all species, race by on their way to the holy terraces. The Vesper bells ring once more, summoning them. Summoning you. Night, ooh, nice change in the night picture there. Night is marked by the churning of the sea above. Time is kept according to Her Excellency's whims, each day and each hour mutable in favor of rituals that can change by the moment. But the darkening world does not relent to her sovereignty. Exiting the hive, you make your way to the 8 terraces from which Achtoven takes its name. The altar of the Vespers is poised at the edge of the 2nd terrace, where the Pontiff is obliged to stand and gaze down upon the congregation below. Bees, of the ordinary kind, of Akrita's minute cousins, drone ceaselessly in adorned nests that hang and drip high above the altar. The space is framed by the boughs of ivy-choked dead trees, whose tops have long since snapped off. Their frayed shadows mark the place where the court gathers in the red twilight to worship. Everyone, highborn and lowborn alike, has gathered on the lowest terrace. Hundreds of eyes fix upon you as you begin your ascension. In the sea overhead, lights twinkle like the distant eyes blinking in the darkness. Her Excellency is not here. She remains in her tower, sensing and listening, but her distant presence is felt all the same. It is always felt. You climb the worn stone stairway to the second terrace, where a podium of tightly braided vines marks the place you are to stand and give the sermon. It is flanked by the dead trees, their trunks gnarled and twisted. The hum of the bees, heedless of your presence, continues. The higher you ascend, the more troubled you become, keenly aware that you feel like an imposter on holy ground. The greenery seems to seethe around you as if breathing heavily. As you look out over the crowd, you see the hive and its bell tower protruding against the horizon like a crooked finger poised to pronounce holy judgment. The long occupation of the Prospero has deformed the castle silhouette into a twisted organic mass. You have never seen the hive without evidence of Her Excellency's conquest. In the decades it has belonged to her, the workers have dismantled and renewed it to suit their needs, carrying away old stone, building towers of dirt and vines. The Prospero, those that crawl, are hardier than the humans who built the castle. When man's time ends, theirs begins. Above the jungle canopy, the oversea churns and shimmers. The court watches you with apprehension. It's time to begin. Recite a prayer or sing a hymn. Let's sing a hymn, I think. In the lifetime you've lived here, you have learned many songs. Few of them have coherent lyrics. Words are only punctuation, sprinkled ritually as refrains to build upon, with harmonies for mortar. Very nice. Pretty words are for... poems. But song ought to be unadulterated sound like the chirp of a cricket. There is a holy dirge that has occupied your mind since you realized that your mother was dying. You cannot sing it as well as a minstrel cricket could, but you think it might do. You clear your throat and summon its melody, twisting up from within you like a living thing. Your voice is clear and pristine, androgynous in its timbre, warm with love and grief alike. To human ears it would sound holy and sincere. A human skin might have prickled with goose flesh to hear such a song, but the Prospero that crowd beneath your podium shiver with disgust at the sound of such a naked human voice. They much prefer Apocrypha. His atonal consuming drone was always more like a vicious scream than a song. Critics. At their open disdain, your voice is halted in your throat, choked away in an instant. You grip the podium with one hand, feeling the tendons in your arm grow unnaturally tight. You are so distressed, you cannot seem to unclench your hand and release it. Excuse me, you whisper in a dry throat. No one hears or understands you. Something else builds in you, eclipsing the dirge. Not a song, but a shout. That too is nearly suffocated before it rolls off your tongue at last. A high, sharp trill as thick and fluid as blood. A memory of a worship cry you've heard before. Wings flutter on the terrace below. Legs creak together. On instinct, you cry out again, louder and sharper, tongue fluttering against your palate in a piercing ululation to mimic the sounds of worship you've heard in the past. The sound is somewhere between a growl and a shriek, dripping with nervous energy. It is wordless, but it is more familiar to the Prospero. It is honest. An eternity of silence screams past in but a few seconds. Then another voice raises to meet your cry. Another. Soon, many of the gathered worshippers are chittering and screeching with you into the night, and your voice dissolves among theirs into something inhuman, and you begin to feel you've done right by them. Even so, you think of the voice that is missing, your mother's, so expertly pitched to match the sounds of the Prospero despite her human language, and grief rises in you like a ferocious tide. You pause, mouth open, teeth bared, and then it pours out of you, a scream with volume, a scream with weight. It feels good. And when it has gone, you are left frozen and hollow, shivering and clutching the altar. Several moments pass as the Prospero follow your lead, each ceasing their unearthly ululation until the garden has swallowed every last echo. Breathless, you raise your now hoarse voice over the retreating cacophony and cry out. Oh, we're doing that. I now swear my soul to the faith of Achtovan. Glory be. Much of the night's anxiety has dissipated in the belligerence of catharsis. Excellent phrase. Leaving the congregation worn and satisfied, malleable to your command. You realize under the weight of their curious stares that they expect you to dismiss them. You look over the crowd. You see many antennae and wings and carapaces that you recognize. Mantodia is among them, but you do not see Apocrypha anywhere. That is all well and good. You would not want him to have heard your agony. In the distance, beyond the tree line, you glimpse something else. A shadow. A familiar silhouette. A silent witness. When you blink, it is gone. I'm going to go formal. Go in peace. The last dregs of eloquence you can summon will have to do. You have heard Apocrypha say this phrase before, but you fear your voice lacks the gravity and conviction he always attached to it. It does the trick all the same, and the assembled congregation begins to scuttle away. The undulating river of chitinous bodies splits at once into many tributaries as they go their separate ways. Some individuals rise above the crowd in flight, but each one is careful not to ascend higher than the terrace permits. The oversea grows dim. You wait for the last of them to leave before making your descent. Even so, you feel watched. With the sound of the oversea and the wind through the terraces urging you on, you retire to your dwelling in solitude. The familiarity of your home is tainted now. It makes you feel like an animal in a trap, pacing, unable to find a restful place that does not remind you of the pain of loss and loneliness. You used to enjoy things. You used to be sociable. Now you scarcely recognize yourself. Before long, you hear a many-limbed scuttling outside the door. A group of small workers are gathered there when you crack the door open. On their backs is laid a tray with a steaming ornate cup and a saucer perched atop it. "Tea!" they cry in unison. "From the Magister!" You thank the servants, knowing that it's no use to try and deter them, though it embarrasses you to have them insist on serving you. They would take it as an insult if you refused. This is what Her Excellency bred them for, after all. Gingerly you accept the servants' burden, thanking them again as they begin to swarm away. Inside, you enter your quarters and set the tray on the larger of two trunks containing all your worldly possessions. Clothing, books, collections of... Oh, I like the sea glass. Collections of sea glass. Your mother had haggled with a passing merchant for the valises when you were young, that you would have some place to keep your modest accumulation of belongings. You recognize it now as luggage, preparing for the day when you would outgrow Actoven. You don't know how you'd manage such a thing now, sworn as you are to serve a god whose voice you have never heard, whose presence you have never felt. The tea steams heartily. There's a small note, folded on the edge of the saucer. Pontiff, I trust you are already learning much about your new role. Your future here is bright, so long as you remain mindful and calm. Let not the sins of your predecessor, anger and anxiety foremost among them, overtake you. Drink this and meditate. Magister Mantodia. I get the feeling they're not big into, feels here, is what I'm seeing. Or at least the allowed feels are very, very carefully prescribed. Some part of you appreciates the concern. The rest of you is rather humiliated. All too well you know that your pain is unwelcome, unsightly, better kept to yourself. And you have tried to keep it to yourself. But it is like a living thing beyond your control. Though you weep only where no one will see you, your sorrow is plain as day. There is no rushing matters of grief or faith. If you could be all that was expected of you, you would not be human. But if you were not human, perhaps it would ease some of your pain. Steam pours off the tea's oily surface. It has a foul odor, sulphurous and earthy, but it is a kind gesture. I'm drinking it. The tea is pungent and bitter, steeped heavily. It warms you, eases some of the immense tension that has collected within you in the last several hours. Suddenly you realize that you are weary beyond measure. You don't know if your exhaustion is brought about by the tea or the stress of your new duties, but you are helpless to deny it. A dull pain beats down your spine and writhes into your ribcage, as it has every night for weeks. Often the pain brings tears to your eyes, but tonight it's nothing you can't bear. Distracted by the day's strange turn of events, you forgot to even dread its return. Perhaps that is the work of the tea as well. Not long after you've arranged yourself, fully clothed and fetal in your bed, you submit to your exhaustion. Looks like we're moving to a new chapter. 2. Holy Ground. It is difficult to wake up. You feel as though you are moving through a fog, though your body for once comes alive, free of the usual aches and discomfiture. When the knock comes at your door, you scarcely hear it. The courier outside chirps a shrill introduction, and you rush to meet him, woozy and unbalanced, disoriented by your lack of pain. You stand quietly and accept his parcel, your new vestments, issued by the faith. The arraignment of the Pontiff differs depending on many things: species, gender, size. By design, your vestments lack any gendered trappings. It is one small, allowable reflection of yourself in an otherwise foreign and unwelcoming garment, and it is well appreciated. You yourself are tiny by the standards of the Actovan elite, yet massive by the standards of the serfs, creatures so small that they have always been called morsels. Your predecessors were wildly different, from you and from one another. Apocrypha is a male wasp, a worker creature, tireless and intense, blessed with wings. His predecessor was a millipede whose immense body was said to coil through the temples such that one end of her would always lead to the other. You are rather more simple to tailor for. Only 2 sleeves. The silkworms must have been relieved. Yeah, no kidding. Versus a millipede? All the tiny, tiny sleeves. The garments are simply stitched, a pellegrina to wear over your open cassock, and a bright yellow sash, subtly embroidered, to tie at your waist. The silken sash slips through your fingers, textured like a shed skin. These are human garments, gathered from some hidden place in the hive where humans once dwelled, then embellished to suit a new religion. More important than these, however, are the rosaries coiled atop them in the parcel, strands upon strands of beads, all of different materials. Some are of dark ancient wood, the likes of which grow deep in the highest terraces. Some are pale, foggy sea glass. Others are strung with pebbles and fragments of coral. These were made by Her Excellency's most faithful and talented artisans, the same artisans who made Apocrypha's many rosaries. When you've laden yourself with these adornments, you find a note lingering at the bottom of the paper-wrapped parcel. Meet me in the courtyard. The soil of Actovan has been tilled by God's body for decades. The plants you live amongst are extensions of its will. Anything else does not belong. Today we will tend to a limb of God. Each terrace grows wild but for its single homage site, and from each of these sprouts a limb of the being that gives life to our island. In return, we care for it as best we can. It is your duty to ensure that these grow well. Be ready to climb. When you arrive, the head groundskeeper is regarding you warily. He inclines his antenna and folds his forelimbs against his chest when you bid him a cheerful "Good morning." His wings beat once, pensively. I suppose something must be good about it. Are you ready, Holiness? As you leave the courtyard and begin the trek up to the terraces, the groundskeeper unfolds his full wingspan. His wings are a beautiful gold-orange fringed with white speckled black, and he looks well at home among the colorful plants that sway and tower the higher you climb. Work in the terraces is difficult. The gardeners are spoken of with a certain emphasis, for only they can perform the specific duties required by God. They are chosen for their long, jointed limbs, the better to wield tools and perform minute and articulate tasks. Some have bladed bodies well suited to trimming topiaries and vines. Some have tried wielding borrowed human arms, but found bare bone to be too numb to use effectively, and preserved limbs with manipulable tendons too prone to rot. You recall discovering such discarded tools once when you were 15. You recall your uncertainty, and the cavalier derision it was met with by the Prospero. You have spent many years in the lower gardens, for you are only permitted to enter the lower 2 terraces. Since you were a child, you helped fetch tools and carry water, but you were seldom allowed to touch the plants. Pruning is a most holy duty. You have not been holy until now. And you have not enjoyed garden work since you were 15. That was when you were no longer a help but a hindrance. No longer a compliant child but a curious one, asking too many questions and growing enough to be in the way of the scurrying groundskeepers. Even so, you continued to fetch things for them. The work got harder and heavier, exhausting you in human ways that the others chided from afar. Even under the weight of their disdain, you wanted to be of help. Even knowing that they butchered the dead bodies of your kin, you wanted to be useful. You were old enough then to understand more of your mother's difficult trade. When you confided in her about the corpses, she spared you further garden toil to teach you languages spoken without words. Deirdre raised you outside of the Prospero faith. Before she served the Queen, you merely lived on Achtoven's coast, where the secrets of the faith were unknown to you both. But you already knew the ugly secrets of other superstitions. You were born with golden eyes, no whites, no irises, no pupils. You see as well as any other human, but it marks you as a thing to which the overseas attention is drawn. Those with eyes like yours, it's said, were surely tainted by an ill omen. In the place where you were born, the oversea was reviled, distrusted, known best for the curses laid on miserable basin dwellers by the leviathans who drifted above. To allow such a child to be born with the mark of that sea would be incomprehensible. And so your mother left, lest you both be dashed upon the rocks for her hubris. The gardens of Achtoven proved, if not exactly welcoming, then tolerant of your aberrations. In truth, the gardens are more accurately termed a jungle. Many of the plants that reside within are unique and abnormal. All are tropical in nature, and some among them are carnivorous. Achtoven is a place ruled by hunger, and many gardeners have succumbed to its appetite. Hurry along. Apocrypha left the entire fourth terrace unpruned, and stray not, some of these plants will snap at even us for meat. Not much on me, but you humans are nothing but meat. They won't turn that down, holy or not. I'm curious as to why he would neglect it. I'd wager it's a welcoming gift for your holiness. His sardonic tone is not lost on him. Let's see, does he hate me? That's not for me to say, Pontiff. The careful, clipped reservation in his tone seems to imply otherwise. You cannot help but think the worst. Apocrypha never warmed to you in your 25 years on Achtoven. Now he grows only colder. You climb and climb, ascending past the dilapidated path to the third terrace and emerging at the fourth, finding to your surprise that thoroughfares have been trodden here in lifetimes past. 2- and 4-legged things walked here once, humans and their beasts of burden. The ground is hard here, grass and moss worn away in a thin path that once was much wider before God began to reclaim it. And there is water on the higher levels as well, ponds and lagoons. Placid, standing water. Its odor is different from the sea air on the coast. As you arrive on the summit of the fourth terrace, you can smell it from afar, but the foliage is too dense to see the path to the water. Before you can think better of it, you marvel aloud at the thought that Apocrypha had to manage all of this dense green life. The groundskeeper glances back at you with his dull, dark eyes. He regards you for a moment, as if you should have known the finer details by now, but he lets it pass, willing to explain. No, this is only the path to the homage site. These paths may grow wild. We gardeners manage them, but we must not interfere too much. Only the body of God must be tended to by one such as yourself. A limb for each terrace, as I wrote. I was told you could read? You assure him that he was not misled. If what he says is true, then God must be frightfully large indeed. Here, the groundkeeper says eventually, darting forward through the foliage. In the gust kicked up by his wings, a branch whips back into your face. You duck, but a twig still ends up twisted in the tight curls of your hair, pulling painfully at your scalp. When you raise a hand to feel for it, you are met with the needle tips of the long, sleek thorns that line the twig. Each is half the length of your forefinger. If you had not ducked, you would have surely lost an eye. So we can untangle ourselves or break the twig off. Let's untangle. With some effort, you free the thorny twig from your hair, taking care not to break it, even as its thorns prick your fingertips. You return to the groundskeeper as quickly as you're able. Where did you go? You ought not stray. Let's protest rather than defend. Nowhere. I got caught on a branch. This isn't the time or place for human clumsiness. We're losing light. As many of his kind are, he is unsympathetic to your myriad human failings. You don't know what you expected, but you take some solace in having explained yourself. Seems like that's what we got to take. Danaeus makes a noise of exasperation and flicks his proboscis to taste the air. With even your human senses, you can taste it as well. Still water growing nearer. You follow the groundskeeper into a clearing, beside which stretches a large, murky lagoon. At the lagoon's edge, a curling root grows from a furrow in the earth. It is patterned and streaked with unnatural colors, saturated purples and yellows in stark contrast to the green grass or thick brown water, and it rises almost to match your height. Danaeus leads you to it, and you note that its otherworldly shape is an illusion of braided vines. Several unruly sprouts have twisted themselves into knots, or begun striving in different directions. Well, can't have things striving in different directions. Here is homage, the limb of God. It's your job to right the vines. See how the old growths turn to wood, how the new growths straying from the trunk? Prune the old and train the new, carefully. Don't prune too much or too roughly. Handle the new growth with care and don't guide it the wrong way. Understood? When you signal your agreement, Danaeus takes his leave, insisting that he must attend to other paths. As he beats his wings and disappears into the foliage, you hear him murmuring something about mushrooms. The homage rises in a single curling tendril to reach the height of your eye level. It is shaggy with overgrowth, like a twisted hand with too many digits. So let's train the new growth toward the lagoon. Towards the lagoon or the oversea? I think the new growth towards the lagoon. Let's prune the old growth by 1/3. Let's be careful with it. An isolated breeze ruffles your clothing and sends its chill tendrils down your spine. Your fingers stall in their careful work, joints momentarily pulsing with an ache. You have felt small pains such as these since you were a child. Growing pains, your mother called them, and though they seemed like pangs beyond your years, they did not hinder you much. But in the month since she passed, they resurfaced, more pronounced and painful than ever, though you are sure that at 25 you should have no growing left to do. Your body seems to disagree, and it has seethed with agonies for the last month unabated. You pause your work, glancing behind you at the lagoon. You have always found the sight of water soothing. Over the lagoon, a dark fog is rising. It collects into a human shape, upright carriage, elegant limbs, a head crowned with water vapor that drifts as if caught in the same breeze. The silhouette is familiar. It is too familiar. Last night you glimpsed it. In the darkening tree line at the Vespers bell, it made itself known. It was familiar then, but you could not make out the details, and when you blinked, it disappeared. Now it is closer. You recognize the frayed hem of a garment, the shape of a hairstyle, the posture. You blink, rub your eyes. The vision remains. I'm not going to ignore it. This is too much of a something. The dark fog seems to shiver in the air, its haze of particles blown away by the wind, leaving a distinct shape. It has your mother's shadow, the same pincushion bun at the base of her neck, the same confident set to her shoulder. The lace of her shawl, pardon for the dog, it's going to bark at the door for a bit. The lace of her shawl is a fringe of vapor. The hem of her skirt drips steadily into the lagoon below as the fog carries her likeness slowly away. There you are. There you are. There you are. Mother! Its retreat halted, it pauses and comes closer, though not close enough. You meet it halfway, approaching the edge of the lagoon, heedless of the homage forgotten behind you. Particles have begun to radiate off of the specter again, obscuring its silhouette. Come closer. Closer, yet closer. Come closer, dear one. What's wrong? The rolling fog of particles seems to obscure her voice, but you hear something beneath it. You draw closer, letting it envelop you. You breathe the sound into your lungs, even as it chokes you. Lovely, lovely young one, don't be afraid. You stumble forward and your foot plunges into the shallows of the lagoon. Water soaks into the hem of your cassock. You do not notice. You do not care. The water is like a dark looking glass, and you flinch when you glance down at it and glimpse yourself. You have taken to avoiding your reflection. At a glance, you look like your mother, but under scrutiny, the differences are too stark. Searching your own face, you see a stranger. You see only a shadow of her face, lacking the traits you remember. Heavy brows without her quizzical arch. Lips missing the crisp, parenthetical lines around them that made her smile so unique and precious. The wisdom and tenderness that so often filled her eyes are traits absent in yours, and they are sorely missed. A droplet disturbs the pool, and your reflection distorts, shatters. You look away, glancing up through the canopy of trees at the roiling sea overhead. You imagine it falling, rushing down to meet you, gushing hot like blood. The fog has a hold over you, caging you in a strange reverie like an embrace. You close your eyes, and when you open them, you are standing knee-deep in the lagoon. Your progress through the water disturbed its glassy surface, breaking away the film that covered it like a mirror. You notice now that the water is unnaturally thick, its contents slick and stinking. When you look down and focus your eyes, you can detect shapes in the darkness. Hands and limbs and ribs and rotting faces, bodies emulsified in algae, and some foul substance that soaks into your boots and sticks to your skin. Your holy raiment floats on the surface, the hem slowly becoming drenched with oily liquid. As you stand frozen, the specter reaches for you with two long fingers, smiling at you with a distorted mockery of your mother's face. There is no warmth in the eyes. There is only wide, vacant emptiness, melting away as the water begins to flow toward you through the air. What are you doing? The groundskeeper races toward you in flight. He beats his wings furiously and makes a terrible, rhythmic chirping noise until the fog draws back, half dissipated. It sounds like some sort of fervent prayer. You stumble as you draw back toward the bank, feeling bodies catching under your feet, fingers and arms and faces tripping you, frail bones twisting. Waterlogged skin sloughs off under the soles of your boots. What have you done? What were you thinking? You stumble up onto the bank and collapse to your knees, holding back a retch. I'm going to tell him the truth that I thought I saw my mother. Well, you didn't. There are no ghosts here, Your Holiness. I should have warned you, I suppose. I didn't think it would come to you so soon. Danaeus' antennae twitch nervously, but he relents and turns away as you compose yourself, rising and spreading his wings as if to form a barrier between you and the lagoon. When you look up, he is still there, back turned, staring out over the dark water. Did you see it? A glimpse. You must think no more of it. We ought to leave this place. You want to question him further, to insist that you cannot simply forget such a thing. But your voice is caught in your throat. You fear that you will be sick if you try to speak again. He leads you back the way you came, and you begin to understand how to navigate within the depths of the terraces. As you pass by ancient trees and colorful fruit-bearing plants, you recognize them as ways to orient yourself. When you've spotted a certain thorny bush in the distance, you know the main path through the terrace is near. Though your clothing has begun to dry, you still feel cold and shaken. The groundskeeper's stalwart silence discourages you from trying to speak about it again, and you walk on, biting your tongue. Once the downward climb has been surmounted, Danaeus alights on the path and turns to you. I'm going on ahead. Not far. You can find your way back from here, I trust. It's a short path. You can, though you feel some small twinge of anxiety at being left alone again. At the same time, you welcome it. For a few minutes, you can collect yourself. The courtyard echoes with the chittering of a hushed conversation, and when you pass through the canopy of ivy that shields the garden entrance, you find yourself face to face with the Synod, where they stand in conversation with Danaeus. Noting your return, he pauses. Metodia's forelimbs twitch as he murmurs, "We shall leave you to your duties, then. Many thanks." As Danaeus leaves, the expectant eyes of Her Excellency's advisors fall upon you. Let's speak to Opalescent this time. Danae said you ran into some trouble in the garden. Let's confide. I feel like this is the way I'm playing right now, is to be more forthright than maybe I should. I thought I saw my mother. Oh, Esser. I'm sorry, but I don't think so. Danae seemed to think that, well, that the god was reaching out to you, but no one can say why. Perhaps it wanted to be sure you wouldn't be tempted by sentiment. Perhaps, well, it doesn't do to question God's works. I suppose not. I've been worrying about something, actually. I'm so happy for you becoming Pontiff and all, but I hope it will not be too difficult. Your faith must be like iron, but there are so many who would seek to wear it down. It's why we are so wary of strangers. They don't understand. They don't want to. They say we are not supposed to believe. They think that we worship false idols. Well, what do you believe, Signifier Opalescent? I don't like to think about such things without guidance. But of course I love God as my benefactor, and Her Excellency is... Well, what would you call her, Pontiff? Let's do a votary. Like a nun? We are all acolytes, after all. We each have vows we've made to her and to ourselves and to the garden. We aren't promised to the sea like others, after all. In the end, we go to dust, to fire, to the earth. My, that's lovely. Yeah, no kidding, I'm no expert. I had no idea what I was saying. You are wise, Esser. Wiser than I, at least. I know you don't see it yet, but I think you will make an excellent Pontiff. You're a fast learner after all, and I will help however I can. It touches you that she would offer such a thing so earnestly, though you know that her understanding of the garden's mysteries is not much better than your own. Perhaps she is more virtuous than you will ever be. Her lifetime of innocent devotion has freed her of the burden of sin, but you wonder if she chose such a path out of fear. Nevertheless, you address her kindly. Thank you, Signifier. Once you are dismissed, you return home and set about the task of removing the lagoon's morbid filth from yourself. The remainder of your afternoon is spent drawing water from an ancient well with which to rinse your skin and scrub the oily residue of algae and decay from your new clothing. The sludge that had soaked your cassock's hem and leaked into your boots had also covered your legs, making your skin itch. Ugh. And you are relieved to be rid of it. The cool, clean water calms you somewhat, but your heart is still uneasy as you settle in for the evening. As ridiculous as you feel for it, you fear glancing out the window and seeing a ghost. Or a god. You are alone, relieved to withdraw once again into solitude, to avoid being interrogated or chastised, to avoid having to talk to anyone with cautious, courtly language, hoping you can avoid offending someone for a few hours. But you are not really alone. Your little 3-room dwelling is haunted by memories. Your mother raised you here. She slept and died in the corner room, the one you now keep shut at all times. You ate with her at the worn, round table in the tiny main parlor. Now, you eat alone, when you have any appetite. Thinking back on the apparition in the garden, the one that wore her silhouette, you wish bitterly for a better haunting than that. But you would not truly wish her such unrest. It is why you buried her yourself. As things are, you have only your memories for comfort, so fond, heavy, or strange. You know, I feel like, I think I'm going to pick a strange memory. Come on, you can do it. Well, oops, that didn't work. I'm going to pick a heavy one. It took you a week to muster enough courage to move her books. Your home was always full of books, novels stacked beside the ancient sofa inherited from a previous resident, anthologies cracked open on the table, dated encyclopedia used to prop open doors and windows. Your mother had brought very little with her to Achtoven, a small trunk of belongings, among them an atlas and dictionary. The atlas was her gift to herself, a reminder of the life she had lived and left. Toward the end of her life, before either of you realized that it was ending, she showed it to you at last. Her home is marked on the maps, a small island in an archipelago far away. Achtoven is not. It had not been born yet. I love the illustration. When you were an infant, your mother set about making a life for you with whatever means she could come by. She built you a crib. She took up sewing to clothe you. She bartered with merchants for books of any kind, delighted to discover that they had begun bringing such things as gestures of goodwill to the Prospero. She had not been a linguist by trade until Her Excellency declared her chief interpreter. On occasion, she quipped that she had little competition for such a title, but all the same she excelled at it, and she taught you to speak and read and write with the aplomb expected from one who made a living communicating. You remember what she often told you. Life is communication. Sometimes someone makes up their mind to never hear you, but you will always have your own voice. Grim mentioned in chat that I could unfold the side navigation and use the arrow buttons to go back and forth between passages, which is a good thing. And I remember reading it in the guidance ahead of time and then missed it. Also noticed that we were in Chapter 2, Pruning is a Most Holy Duty, which I appreciate. When she died, she left a stack of books unfinished, half read, or never begun. In her downtime, she was always reading, always discovering new books in the myriad shadows of the island, or coming by new reading material through traders and merchants. You read many of them together, shared thoughts and impressions and ideas. With her gone, the sight of them was too much. In a daze, you gathered them all and confined them to her empty bedroom. You cleared a path through the house for yourself to ensure you would still be able to function, still be able to come and go without breaking down each time you walked through the door. It was an effort made in vain. For the first 2 weeks, you found yourself being shattered by other reminders. Now, you take comfort in the presence of her books, in the way they had shaped your life. A foundation that still lingered, sturdy and enduring like an ancient journal, a permanent record that she had lived. All right. No matter the pain it causes you to reminisce, you cherish your memories of your mother, the lifetime you spent with her, the wisdom you learned from her. Though your heart aches and your throat tightens to think of the experiences you will never share again, you are glad to have shared them in the past. You do not want the twisted thing in the garden to be counted among your memories of her. The more you reflect on your life with her, you realize that what the groundskeeper told you was true. It was not her. It could only mimic her. But why? I'll take a more pleasant interpretation. An effort to reach out to you? Fatigue comes over you swiftly as the night darkens and you retire to bed early, though you lay awake well into the night, tormented by an unquiet mind. Chapter 3, The Shadow of the Ship. Human life is parasitic too. Nice. You wake to find the dead skin has built up on your hands overnight, lending your flesh an ashen pallor and a flaking, scaled appearance beyond anything ordinary. Something more reptilian than human. Out of your trunk of belongings, you dig a pair of leather gloves and don them. The creak of fitted leather holds the comfort of a second skin, but your own skin still itches beneath the material. Perhaps it was something you touched in the garden. You don't know. You distract yourself with the labors of cleaning the hive temple, left in disarray by Epocrata after his retirement. Ancient human vestments are hidden away in a closet beyond the nave, a dalmatic and surplice left singed and dusty. They are much too large for you, and you leave them be, wishing not to disturb whatever ghosts might still inhabit them. What am I going to do? Oh, I should have read those. Oops. You toil to renew the temple, including chalices and thuribles and similar. It takes all morning and well into the afternoon. As you are finishing your work, a servant darts into the room and hails you, antenna twitching wildly. Hey, Pontiff, come with me. Apologies, but I got business to attend to. Oh yeah? What kind of business? You just want to rest for a spell. A few moments alone, free of obligation. I'm going to continue to play the truth teller, personal business. Well, that'll be tough. You're needed upstairs. Come along. It's no use insisting. It occurs to you that you could pull rank if you so wished, but you don't wish to. It would only make you feel worse. You follow, skin crawling beneath your gloves. that illustration. The old Califera wet nurse goes by Armand. Said he'd meet you up here. You know the skin weaver? I've got another message to deliver, but you stay put if you please, Holiness. He'll be along. And with that, the courier darts away on his many legs to convey some other message elsewhere in the hive. You lean back against a sturdy column in the wall and try to soothe your hands, rubbing them together to quell the itching. It helps less than you hoped, but you felt far worse. You can endure it. Armand appears around the corner shortly. There is no mistaking him. He is a large, long-legged creature wearing a tattered human skin stretched over his face. Ugh. The cartilage still stands stiff in the nose, and the torn edges are still red and raw, but the flesh is stained and leathery after years of preservation. His antennae protrude from small holes punctured through the skin, twitching at you. You steady yourself and we can stare at the wall beyond him, or look him in the eyes. Let's look him in the eyes. Hail, good Pontiff! I was told I could trouble you for a blessing. Follow me, if you would. Sure, let's follow creepy human face skin-wearer. This will be your first time in the charnel nursery, I hear. Oh. The creak of his voice is heady with fondness. He's correct. You and Deirdre were never before permitted to this room. The nursery is hot and humid, lined with beds of moist, rotting compost. Growing maggots writhe inside their bassinets of waste. The smell of the chamber turns your stomach, but you are careful not to demonstrate any untoward sign of repulsion. This is only natural, after all. This is the first cradle of life for many of the Prospero. Human life is parasitic, too. Oh, these dear little ones, so peaceful, and waiting so patiently to be blessed. Shall I leave you to it, then? Oh, I've got questions. Of course. Fire away, then, Pontiff. Let's ask what kind of blessing. Oh, just a few heartfelt words shall do from a holy mouth such as yours. I talk to them often, but I think they could use some divine encouragement. Apocrypha was always too busy to be called upon night and day for bedtime stories, but you have time. Anything else before you begin? I am going to ask about the mask, because that is creepy AF. Oh, please do. I am so very fond of it. I think it fits me quite well, don't you? To the credit, it is about the size of his head, agonizingly stretched to cover his own face. You nod and smile thinly, watching his large black eyes dart beneath the skin that no doubt partially obscures his vision. I want to know why a human face. Why not? It was not being used when I took it, and it makes for so elegant a mask. You are lucky to be so handsome by nature, you know. But worry not, I am satisfied with my precious. It's funny, you know. We've met before, you and I. But you were Stella Grob and I was quite forgettable. Not likely to forget me now, are you? There are many Prospero with the same name. There are others called Mantodia and Danaeus, but the most elite are designated by their title or some other epithet. Though his methods disturb you, it's true that Armand has certainly found a way to set himself apart from the other Califera. Yeah, I'm not going to forget him. Very well. Be good, darlings. He takes his leave, but you can hear from the thud of his footsteps that he doesn't stray far beyond the nursery. Is it perverse that the sight of Armand's stolen face stirs only the faintest revulsion in you? Perhaps, but you cannot dwell on such things. You must bury them as they emerge, like the bodies concealed in the lagoon. You must weigh them down and let them sink until you feel them only as a dull, quiet ache. The sound of the maggots is unrelenting, amplified in the silence. It seems as if they never stop writhing. You rack your brain for appropriate words according to the faith, but you've never observed this ritual. You suppose that you'll have to make it up as you go. It isn't orthodox, but your own words come easiest to you, and they feel more earnest for it. All right, looks like we get to select things. Greetings, hey there, hi. I'm going to go a little more informal. You're getting stronger. All right. Hey there, little ones. You're getting stronger every day. You'll all be able to fly one day soon. Isn't that a beautiful thought? Even now, your wings are on their way. Everyone is going to be so thrilled to meet you. Be well until then, okay? A few of the maggots pause in their writhing as if aware that you are addressing them. After releasing a short, sharp exhale and unwinding your rosaries from your fingers, you open the heavy door and nod to Armand, who waits eagerly outside. Oh, thank you, Pontiff. They sound very pleased. Excellent. They really do respond to new voices. A being needs new experiences, after all. You smile thinly, nodding in agreement, struck mute momentarily by his words. Words your mother often said, parodied where you least expected them. But he's not wrong. When you find your voice again, you clear your throat and insist that you're happy to help. With that, you take your leave. Exiting the nursery is a welcome and literal breath of fresh air. As you leave, taking care not to let the door slam behind you, and start back downstairs, you notice a group of servants racing off in different directions with an extravagant sense of urgency, some of them crawling along the walls in their haste. The courier who summoned you previously breaks through their ranks, for he is larger than the rest, and stops in front of you. Synod wants a word with you, Holiness. They're at the observatory. Before you can reply, he is gone again. The observatory is a room that seems to hang off the edge of the hive, built to best view the seas above and below. A wide range of nautical and celestial instruments, from astrolabes to sextants, some in disrepair, line the walls. There, the triumvirate members of the Synod have gathered at one massive window, dubbed the Oculus. Wide at the middle and narrowing at its corners, ringed with stained glass, the previous inhabitants of Actoven styled it purposely to resemble a massive eye gazing out upon the sea. A large telescope is poised at the pupil of the Oculus. Observing it are Her Excellency's advisors, each of them silent and attentive. All right, I'm going to speak to the one I have not spoken to yet, to Harpactor. I have to hit the text is what I'm failing there. Slacking already, Esser Queenskin? Where have you been, eh? Let's continue honesty, tending to the nursery. Ha! Armand summoned you. I bet that was a shock to your senses. Your kind isn't too partial to our nourishment, as I recall. Your food is a pleasing luxury to us, once it has ripened and rotted, or I think we would not seek to keep you so well fed. Your trash helps us feed the little ones, you know. I don't suppose you'll take to our nectar now that you've become Pontiff? Let's be wry, probably not. More for us, then. It all works out in the end, you see. Her Excellency knows what she's doing. She's spoken well of you to me already. In fact, she wants me to ensure you hear of the ship approaching. Let's be optimistic and ask if it's a friendly vessel. It could be a trade ship. They made a big deal of coming in peace the last time, but one of the crew seems sick. Could just be seasickness. You humans are fragile in that way, but one can never be too careful. I'll still have the guards posted and battle ready. That does seem wise. Maybe they're coming to take care of all these insects. Of course it's wise. The only contact we've made was sending a single courier to tell the captain to get lost. And they did get lost, to their credit, but we have no idea what any strange vessel could be planning. Why insist on returning? I'm not about to trust everyone who comes into port. Let's ask a question and see who we can trust. Her Excellency, she won't steer us astray. If she decides to put her trust in this vessel, I'll remain cautious, but I won't question it. Her Excellency knows what Actoven needs. But I can't chat all day, Esser. There's greater need for me elsewhere. I'm off. Have a look through the scope if you want to see that vessel for yourself. Harpactor turns swiftly and marches away, maneuvering her battle-worn body with purpose and pride. Her guards obey and fear her as surely as she obeys and fears Her Excellency. Without Her Excellency's guidance, Harpactor would be thrown off balance, uncertain of how much liberty she may take, or how much of her own nature to indulge. She wishes only to be a weapon wielded by her queen. You put your eye to the scope. A ship indeed approaches Achtoven head-on, its sails billowing in a distant wind. It looks to be a large vessel, aged and battered, but well kept all the same. The sight of it, so brazen on the horizon, strikes some wistful emotion in your heart. In the last several years, passing ships have become much rarer than they once were. You are frightened, mystified, I think mystified by its nearness. Sweeping into a low bow, you take your leave of the Synod, free at last to return to your quarters for the day. In the distance, the ship continues towards Achtoven, a speck on the horizon. A month ago, Her Excellency turned the same ship away. A month ago exactly, your mother was breathing her last. She was not sick, not unwell, not even particularly frail for a woman well into her 6th decade. But in the days before she passed, she had been short of breath, uncommonly tense. You'd stayed by her side to be sure she was well, and so you had been by her side when her heart failed. You don't have any pictures of your mother. You remember her, but you worry that memory will fade. If you were alive 10 years from now, 20, will you still remember the sound of her voice? The touch of her hands, reassuring and warm to hold your own? Or sternly tender as she braided your hair when you were young? Her face, the soft lines around her mouth and the natural shape of her brows that gave her face a wise, welcoming candor? A month has passed, but your grief is still a raw wound. You have hidden it away as best you can, crushing it into something heavy and corrosive in the pit of your heart. But it has awakened something in you. Something wrong. Something weird. Your guts twist painfully. A pulse moves through your head, striking behind your eyes and down your neck, and you must lean against a wall for support. For a moment, your spine feels loose and sinuous before becoming painfully rigid again. A sharp, shocked inhale, and you recover. When you return to your dwelling, you feel that there is something you must do. It is a notion you have not been able to entertain for a month. Before she died, when she was in pain, but still lucid, Deirdre told you where to find a letter she'd been trying to write for years. "It's not my best work," she had said, grimacing, "but you should know of it." It is in her desk, tucked away at the bottom of a drawer and left unsealed. Candle in hand, you enter her darkened room to search for it, feeling like an imposter at her desk. The letter is precisely where she said it would be. Its parchment is creased and worn, but the ink is still dark. Deirdre's elegant handwriting is unmistakable. "Esser, I owe you an apology. More than one, I'm afraid. I've tried to write this many times. To do so at all would be to admit to myself that I might leave you sooner than I'd like, or that I may be too cowardly to tell you certain things in person. But you know that I like to be prepared. There are things I still don't understand myself, and I have seldom known how I might express them. But there are things you ought to know. Before you were born, a creature came to my home to die. A many-eyed creature of flesh and bone and blood. Even now I don't know who or what it was, but it was harmless and it was suffering. So I watched over it for the few days it took to pass on. It was grateful. When it awoke the day before it died, it spoke to me. It asked me to eat of its flesh, and in doing so blessed the child that is scarcely yet to quicken in my womb. I trusted it. I still do. It told me this as well, that though my child would be blessed, they would also be weird. A curse in its way, for some will never accept you. But with my age and constitution, I feared losing you before you could even come into the world. I feared that you would inherit your father's health, which had failed him before we even knew of you. We've discussed the weird before. I wish I could give you all the answers, but I can't. I don't know enough. I have tried to learn, but my guesses would only hinder you. You will know yourself when the time comes. In the meantime, you know other things. You know that you are my child. You know that I love you. You know why I brought you here, but now I am dead, I assume, and have left you here. I want you to know that I am sorry. This is not a life for you, but they will not let you leave easily. We know too many of their secrets. That is my folly as well, but I knew little of this place for the first decade we lived here. I would have taken you anywhere free of humans, but other beings can be just as superstitious, and just as dangerous if superstition goes unchecked. I feared for you too much, enough to blind me to the future's risks. I wanted to ensure you would not be hurt, but perhaps that in itself has hurt you. This isolation is no solution. Let this be only one stop on your journey. You must be allowed to grow. The world is yours to experience. I hope to be there with you, to leave this place with you. But if I'm not, someone must tell you this, and I want it to be me. You are not wrong. You are not cursed. You are someone extraordinary. Someone completely unique. I wanted so much to bring you into the world, but now I see that I've done too much to protect you from it. I'm sorry. Your life is yours, and it always will be. I love you. By the end, your mouth is twisted into a teeth-chattering rictus of grief. The text in front of you doubles and blurs through a film of tears, but you blink them away again and again, feeling them course down your cheeks. The pain you've held on to for a month coalesces and leaves you stricken. Your fingers twitch and the letter flutters to the floor in a rustle of pages. You want to gather them, but you are frozen. Your arm twists unnaturally, falling to your side in a boneless, rubbery movement. There is no pain, but another sensation, like the feeling of hair unbraiding, fibers unfurling, but somewhere deep within your flesh. Before your eyes, muscles and tendons bulge in ways they shouldn't, writhing beneath your skin. It feels impossible to tear your gaze from. 1,000 thoughts scream into your mind at once. It's an illusion. I'm hallucinating. It hurts. What am I? What's wrong with me? And loudest among them is the piercing thought that hasn't left you in weeks. I want my mother. The breath rattles in your throat, a wheeze caught somewhere between a laugh and a sob. It feels absurd, mortifying to be 25 and thinking such a thought so ardently, as if it could bring her back. As far as the rest of the island is concerned, you are grown. You should have gotten over this long ago. But even they know love. The love they feel for her excellency, her wisdom and protection like that of a mother to them all. Without her, they would be as lost as you feel. Again, you think of the apparition in the garden. For a moment, the thought that the thing that calls itself God looked so deeply into your heart to torment you, it enrages you. You are not accustomed to anger, and it burns deep in your chest, the searing pain of it rising up your throat like bile, like venom. But all at once it is gone, swallowed back and extinguished like so many other momentary agonies. You refuse to feel shame for your sorrow. But you refuse by the same token to allow it to control you, to allow anything to control you through it. By degrees, stability returns to your body. Soon your limbs feel like your own again. Gingerly, you gather your mother's final missive and fold it carefully with shaking hands. She would not want this for you. It's time to loosen your vigil, let go of this month of punishment. It can't be done in a night, and even now you are crying bitterly, lonelier than ever, terrified by the earnest guilt in Deirdre's words. But something stricken in your heart has begun to loosen. You forgive her. That is easy to do. You never begrudged her the life you have led, though it has not been perfect. But she asked your forgiveness and you give it freely. It is harder to forgive yourself. It takes hours to quiet your mind enough to come by some small scrap of rest, but you manage. Though your exhaustion is too complete to resist, your dreams are not pleasant. When you sleep well, you dream of being submerged deep in a dark, twinkling abyss, breathing not quite water as if it were air. These you like best, dreams of oceans rising and falling, swallowing and transforming life where it is caught between disparate tides. The seas have always fascinated you. Now an old recurring nightmare twists your familiar comforts into something wretched. The sea in your dream contracts around you, the pressure crushing you. The world suddenly squeezed into a cruel, lightless shaft like an ancient well. You are trapped in a darkening crevice, alone in a body that decays before your eyes. Your muscles unravel, your skin sloughs off, your bones contort like rubber. You feel a phantom of your day-to-day pains, even as you sleep. 4 upon a painted ocean. Let's see where we're at. History cannot erase the truth of this place. You wake feeling perhaps more exhausted than before. The itching in your hands has abated, at least. But when you work up the courage to peel off your gloves, you find yourself scraping away lengths of papery skin from your hands and fingers. There's little pain, only the occasional twinge accompanying a strange sense of relief, and the skin beneath is dewy and new. And that disturbs you more than the alternative. Pain you are familiar with. When you leave your dwelling, you soon find that the island is in a cheerful, albeit cautious, uproar. The ship that appeared on the horizon yesterday docked in the night, without obstruction from the Prospero. Neither Danaeus nor any member of the Synod have indicated that there is anything urgent you must see this morning, so you make your way to the harbor. The old castle town and the slums of the port itself are now inhabited by the morsels, the Prospero of lesser standing whose labor the upper classes rely on. Here and there, more of the Harpactor's guards have gathered to watch over the port in case of any disruption from visitors. They do not impede you as you pass. History cannot erase the truth of this place, that this castle, its steeples and spires, its cobblestone town, was not built for the Prospero. The architecture that still remains was created by and for humans. Another two-armed, two-legged, upright people could have made similar things, but this island is struck again and again with the marks of human craftsmanship and habitation. Their bones turn up from time to time, their journals and their trinkets, their grief. Her Excellency's haunted palace was never hers. It is not blasphemy to say this. She is proud of her conquest. The port is abuzz with the clamor of wings and legs and apprehension. Amid the sea of scuttling onlookers, one familiar silhouette pivots from customer to customer. Achtoven's harbor was busier when you were younger. As an interpreter, it was Deirdre's responsibility to convey Her Excellency's expectations to visitors and facilitate effective trade. She often brought you along to port, but just as often you were to stay out of strangers' sight until she was certain they were trustworthy enough. Leech the Wastrel proved trustworthy. Though you do not see him often, he has been allowed to come and go for many years, for his eclectic wares appeal to the Prospero. Some months ago, he disappeared. His long absence was reported by the morsels, who appear excited by his return. When Leech spots you, he hails you warmly. Esser, is that you? Or perhaps the question is this: are you the you I knew? He looks different than he once did, older, more haggard. A fresh set of scars lingers under his eye, extending just beyond the edge of his mask, an ever-present adornment you suspect conceals other scars. Let's engage. No, I think not, are you? Still in one piece, and that's enough Leech for me. I don't suppose anybody missed old Leech too much. I wondered where you'd gone. Well, that's very kind of you. Let's call it a misadventure. I capsized and lost everything, nearly lost my own life. Took some time to scrounge up new wares. Once I got things back together, I found a ship that'd take me here. Have you seen it up close yet? Well, no, not yet, no. It's really something else. Beautiful vessel, odd crew, and I do mean odd, but they treated me well, and you should go and have a look. Let's see what he means by odd. See for yourself. I won't speak for anybody's character. I barely know these folks, but I can say with confidence that they're an interesting bunch. Worth talking to. Well, maybe I will. Maybe it'd do you some good to meet someone who doesn't have, a carapace. I won't be much for conversation for a while anyhow. I've got to go set up. It's been a pleasure though, Esser. Always a pleasure. Goodbye, Leech. The mere thought of the ship holds some strange magnetism, the promise of some glimpse of the world beyond Actoven, set at odds with the suspicion heaped upon it by the Prospero. You approach it through a crowd of morsels streaming in the opposite direction. Behind you, Leech is calling out for business, and they are answering readily. The ship is not far. It's a large, traditional vessel towering over the port, casting a long shadow of sails and masts. You can hear activity on the desk, but you can only see the crew who have disembarked. 2 individuals are posted on the dock, the shorter one still and elegant, the taller of the 2 pacing and glancing about, cape whirling behind them. You conceal yourself against an unmanned market stall, suddenly anxious to be seen. I'm going to watch from afar. Despite your best efforts, they seem to notice you. The taller stranger's vibrant red eyes are fixed upon the market stall. They tilt their head upward and call to someone above. Within moments, a silhouette emerges at the rail, indistinct beneath the shadow of the mast. When they speak, you can hear the rasp of their voice, albeit very distantly. But we've nothing to hide. Besides, the good lieutenant has us covered in case of anything untoward. That was a lot of leaning back. I don't think I'll do that again. That looked weird. Mortified at being spotted, you dart away down an alley between a cluster of vacated shacks. You had hoped not to be seen, but there was evidently some risk. It's worth noting, you suppose, that the ship's crew seems to have at least one pair of keen eyes. Either that or you are miserably unskilled when it comes to stealth. Both options are equally likely. You chastise yourself for harboring any interest in these strangers. After all, they are far more alien to you than the strange life you already lead. The Prospero, despite their many oddities, are familiar. You have known them all your life, watched their rituals, learned their body language. You scarcely know how to act among anyone else. The last human face you looked upon was no more than long-dead flesh fashioned into a crude mask. Ugh. You take a shortcut back to the hive, where you find the Synod embroiled in a discussion on the ground floor. It's simply ridiculous, Mantodia is hissing, but Harpactor clicks her mandibles sharply upon noticing your arrival. The Magister falls silent, and Olivalis turns to stare at you, offering a friendly flick of her antenna. Look who it is! Hello, Pontifessor. Hello. What's ridiculous? Well, hello, your holiness. The good Mantodia is feeling a little treasonous today, questioning her orders and such. Aren't you, your Magistry? Despite your best efforts, you feel eyes widen unbecomingly. You've never heard anyone speak to Mantodia in such a way before. Olivalis seems similarly surprised. Mantodia's long forelimbs tremble for a moment before he composes himself. How charmingly absurd a suggestion, Harpactor. I'm doing no such things. I simply find it unwise to send the new beacon of our faith into a den of... Let's be sincere and say strangers. Strangers can be awfully frightening. Maybe the Magister has a point, Harpactor. Oh, but they might be very interesting as well. What do you think, Esser? Well, we get to tell the truth and say, I think one of them has seen me already. Excuse me? What would possess you to allow this to happen? His voice is harsh, unexpectedly so, and the tension in his limbs is unmistakable. He seems genuinely angry, and it is the first time you've seen such a display, let alone one directed at you. Olivalis twitches nervously, but Harpactor seems amused. I'm actually going to evade in this case and say in the interest of reconnaissance. Ha! Now that's the right idea, Esser. That's perfect. Her Excellency wants something of you, you see. She told us to tell you that you personally ought to head out to that ship and have a chat with the captain. Sounds like you should be game to play ambassador for a day, eh? Of course. Excellent. Get out of here then. The morsels must be positively mobbing the damned harbor by now. Try not to step on anyone. You promise not to and take your leave, sweeping a low bow before each of the courtiers. As you're leaving, you hear them continue to argue amongst themselves. You are ashamed to think that your indiscretions have become a source of tension between them. It's a short trip back to the ship, but you are waylaid here and there by swarms of morsels bustling through the harbor, eager to barter with Leech and examine the strange new vessel from a distance. When he catches sight of you, Leech throws up his free hand in a wave. I'm going to wave back. Once you arrive at the ship, you edge through the crowd. A stoic crew member approaches you, and when you explain that you've been tasked with meeting the captain, you are conveyed aboard with aplomb. Oop, wrong click. As you embark, a figure wrapped head to toe in linen bandages approaches you, tipping their hat back in acknowledgement. Though their entire face is bandaged, a pair of dark spectacles still perch on what you assume to be their nose. From their garb, they appear to be the captain of this vessel. Their hat, its brim clutched between their bandaged hands, looks as though it's endured the lifetimes of several men. Well met. I am called Zaj Zud. Are you the envoy? It would seem so. It would, wouldn't it? It's a pleasure regardless. Your queen has nothing to fear from us, that I promise. We aren't the pillaging sort. See for yourself. Since I'm not at the helm at the moment, shall I give you a quick tour? Yes, please. Let's take a look around. Wonderful. Let's see. We're a little understaffed at the moment. There are only a few of us. Myself, Felocial, Volquaz, Serafial, and Lieutenant Ponomarenko. Ponomarenko. There we go. Ponomarenko. Yes, you'll notice a few cannons here and there, a few firearms, but we must protect ourselves on the open water, mustn't we? By the by, it's a pleasure to meet you. Esser. That suits you somehow, if you don't mind my saying. Esser, I do hope you'll find my ship quite inoffensive. Have yourself a look around. You're very much invited to do some snooping. Their spirited candor is refreshing, if a little intimidating. It helps you think that you cannot see their face. You are more accustomed to carefully listening to the tone of someone's voice, the cadence of their words, the subtle meanings concealed in sounds. This Zaj Zud seems straightforward enough. Like Olivalis at her most excitable, you suspect they could happily go on and on if no one stopped them. Seemingly pleased that you've decided to stay for a spell, Zaj Zud tips their hat and plucks at the hem of their ragged coat in some semblance of a curtsy. A moment later, they turn away and produce a complex-looking sea chart from their pocket. In the harbor below, morsels pause occasionally to listen to the activity on board, antenna twitching. Though many of them cannot understand your speech or the crew's, they know you by sight and watch you with interest before darting away. Let's examine the bow. You stand at the bow and look out over the island. The head of the ship is turned toward the hive, granting a view of all that Her Excellency's might has wrought. Peering over the edge, you notice the battered yet exquisitely ornate beakhead, adorned with extravagant carving. The figurehead is situated on the Beaks' underside. You glimpsed it from the harbor before embarking, but at the angle the ship is docked, you cannot see it clearly from any vantage point. The steering wheel is nearby, and Zaj Zud remains there, poring over their sea chart. Behind them stands the placid individual who first ushered you onto the ship, surveilling you calmly. As you turn away from the ship's rail, they step forward and indicate your attention with a curt nod. Their eyes are intent and opalescent pink, much like the gems that fall from the storms that are said to bluster to Achtoven's north. Their faces still and stoic as they offer you a hand to shake. When you take it, they begin to speak. An ambassador, we presume. We are Felocial, of a similar position to yourself. We have been here before, and have been turned away. However, we come bearing a passenger bound for your island. They are brisk in nature, clearly of some importance on this vessel, but they seem amenable to any questions you may have, which is what brings you to Achtoven. We are ferrying this leech, and whatever cargo he amassed to your island. No other business, unless, of course, you are proposing an agreement, as in a trade agreement. We wouldn't speak of another kind, as there is no other service we can provide. The very notion seems a bit scandalous. It's certainly nothing you could discuss yourself. Let's evade a little bit. I wouldn't know what we could trade. No, surely there's something to be sold. The denizens of this isle trade with leech, after all. Perhaps. I will have to ask, of course. Of course. Let us know either way. Well, certainly I will. You glance behind you toward the towering spires of the hive and note the darkening day. The afternoon is quickly fading. With a deep bow, you inform Felocial that you ought to be going, and that the information they've provided will be very much appreciated. We are certain we will see you again, Pontiff, but yes, farewell for now. Goodbye, Felocial. Tajud is studiously poring over the sea chart clutched in their bandaged hands. You cannot see it clearly, but it looks like nothing you've seen in any atlas. Occasionally, the captain makes a small sound of indignation and rotates the map a great deal. In the harbor below, morsels pause occasionally to listen to the activity on board, antenna twitching. Though many of them cannot understand your speech or the crew's, they know you by sight and watch you with interest before darting away. Let's look at the masts. The sails have been stowed and the galleon's masts jut high overhead. Gazing up at them, you find yourself distracted by the distant tides of the oversea swirling darkly above. But once you've allowed yourself a moment to gawk, you resume your examination of the ship. Guy lines support the masts for greater stability. The posts themselves are thicker than you... The posts themselves are thicker than you could wrap your arms around, and the material is hewn from sturdy wood, very different from the trees on Achtoven. Circling the central mast, you notice the ladder rungs and shroud ropes necessary to climb and maintain the sails. The thought of doing such a thing is dizzying or exhilarating or terrifying. I think exhilarating. Glancing up at the other mast, you notice someone doing just that. A tall figure has been climbing the rigging with no harness or precaution to speak of, and in the next moment, they drop a good 15 feet to land in front of you in a deep crouch. You shriek. The stranger also shrieks. A few pairs of eyes turn to you before glancing away, utterly unfazed. Apparently, such diversions are of almost no consequence on this vessel. One has to wonder how often they happen. Sorry, didn't mean to frighten you. Should have warned you, my apologies. As he scrambles to his feet, you catch your breath and assure him there was no harm done, apologizing for startling him in turn. He is an individual of remarkable height and thinness, towering over you, even while stooping sheepishly. Mutually, you agree to take another stab at an introduction. The stranger turns away from you for a moment, recovering his composure, before wheeling back around to face you, teeth bared in a nervous grin. His skin is smooth and hairless, and it has an unmistakably purple cast. Faint iridescence shines at his high cheekbones and the joints of his knuckles when he offers you one long, thumbless, perfectly symmetrical hand to shake. Greetings, friend. I'm called Perithius Volquaz. I am the barrelman of this vessel. I'm usually working overhead, but I do drop by from time to time, as you well know. Anything else you'd like to know? See what brings him to Achtoven. The captain picked up a drifter in distress headed to this harbor. We already knew the route, since we've been out this way before. Have you lived here long? This seems like a strange place for humans to settle. I'll be truthful and say all my life. Oh, my, then this is home to you. I left my home to voyage with the captain. Forgive me for saying so, but this place doesn't seem awfully friendly to outsiders. I'll be wry and say it's not. Oh, well, I can at least offer you my own friendliness. We can all benefit from a moment of kindness. Are you happy here? It's a difficult question, but he cannot have known. You clasp your hands tightly behind your back and force a placid expression, reminding yourself that he means nothing other than to be kind. I will continue my truth-telling and say I've been grieving. I'm ever so sorry to hear that. I hope you'll find peace. His ever-present, toothsome smile falters. Though you dislike openly saying such a thing to a stranger, the compassion in his expression leaves you feeling unguarded, wishing to unburden yourself of some tiny fragment of pain. It isn't right. You must go before you cry in front of the poor man. Thank you, I appreciate that. You glance behind you toward the towering spires of the hive and note the darkening day. The afternoon is quickly fading. With a deep bow, you inform Volquaz that you ought to be going, although you appreciate having spoken to him. Safe journeys, Esser. Offering a courtly bow, he turns and scuttles away up the mast with unexpected speed. Tajud is studiously poring over the sea chart, clutched in their bandaged hands. All of this looks the same, and now dusk already draws near. You'll soon be expected to return to the hive. Is this goodbye then, Esser? If there's anything else Her Excellency requires from us, do let me know. Perhaps we'll meet again. Perhaps we will, Captain. As you leave the ship, something stirs in your chest at the thought of what it must be like to live on a seafaring vessel. The Achtoven skyline, so thick with foliage and the many overhangs of the hive, often obscures a clear view of the oversea. You imagine having the privilege of staring up at it day after day, unobscured, and you feel lightheaded. It occurs to you that you are beginning to do exactly what your mother wished. meeting new people, having new experiences, understanding more of the world. The more you think on it, you can accept that this is something you've always wanted as well. But you are still reluctant to want such things too freely. When dusk begins to settle over Achtovan, a secretary seeks you out in the Hive Temple where you are lighting candles and incense. Greeting, Pontiff. Her Excellency wishes to have you meet with the outsider again come morning. You will do this? By her tone, it is more a command than a question. It is a test, seeing if you have the temerity to refuse a direct request. Or perhaps testing whether you agree too thoughtlessly. Let's be dutiful and say, of course, if she wishes it. The secretary flicks her antenna and drapes the foremost segments of her body over the back of a rotten pew, relaxing her posture for a moment. Excellent. There's nothing especially wholly on for tomorrow, so return to the harbor as soon as you're able. Inspect the galleon and see that the outsiders do nothing untoward. Harpactor's guards will be posted if there's need of them, and you'll report to me by day's end. You signal your understanding with a nod, and she seems satisfied. Unfurling the rest of her long, coiled body from the corner of the room, she marches on myriad legs out of the open doorway. When the incense has burned away, you begin snuffing the candles one by one until the temple is thick with smoke and heavy, sweet aromas. The scent relaxes you, and you smell it on your clothes even once you've returned to your dwelling. For the first time in weeks, you find yourself falling asleep with little effort. 5 on mast or shroud. And our little blurb now is, you feel it beating, but is it really there? You wake in a cold sweat, muscles trembling. Your heart races and you feel its panicked flutter echoing hard through your chest, but you cannot remember why. Straining in the half-light of dawn, you turn on your side and squint into the bleak, unlit corners of your room, struggling to recall what woke you. A dream? A nightmare? A vision? I'm going to go with vision. Something comes to you, a faint glimmer of recognition. Yes, you believe you remember now. I dreamt of water. Floating in a cradle of warm water, not the water of the womb, but something more vast. Some ocean that stretches far beyond you in every direction. In the throes of restless sleep, you often feel that impossible surf lapping at your skin. The currents are strong and your limbs move slowly through the water, but you are at ease. This sea would not, perhaps cannot, drown you. It came to being within you, or you within it. In truth, you do not know the origin, but it has been with you for years, the perpetual motion of ancient waves in the back of your mind. You would break yourself on the rocks of that sea if you could, but it offers no purchase, no magic entrance, no sign of welcome. All the same, you feel its distant shadows shift across your skin every day. In dreams like these, you occupy an insensate form, like a microscopic creature at the bottom of the sea. It is always dark, and a deep pressure always stifles your hearing. You never glimpse your body. You scarcely even feel its presence. But last night, you felt whole. When you looked down at yourself in the gloaming darkness, you beheld a fusion of limbs, an incomprehensible body scaled with ichor iridescence. It was not yours. It couldn't have been. And yet, you felt as if it had always been a part of you. You felt present within it, even as it twisted and unraveled and moved with odd propulsion through fathomless currents, undulating gently. What struck you most of all was this. You felt no pain, no sorrow, no dread. Even in the inner workings of your own mind are impenetrable to you, uncomfortable to dwell on. You are not ready to be alone with yourself. You are nothing but a heretic or a bad omen or a human. I'm going with human. There's only so much you can endure. Once more, you turn instead to your memories for direction. Despite the bittersweet comfort they bring, which only seems to fuel your lingering sorrow, you cherish them, and in the light of many things, perhaps you can learn from them. When you were 15, you began to understand the depth of your condition, your weirdness, your otherness. Wanting you to have a better understanding of your wayward life, your mother tried to field your many questions. We fear things we cannot understand. None of us, humans, Prospero, deep folk, understand the sea above. Things dwell there, creatures as massive as the castle and many times older, and we cannot reach them, but they can reach us. You remember asking, why do they care about us? I couldn't say. Those beings are all as different from each other as you are from the larva in the castle. But we care what they do. We stop and stare when we see their shadows moving high above. Perhaps they like to stop and watch us too. Many fear their attention, but others worship them. Deirdre was a teacher before she fled her previous life. She spoke of it to you on an occasion. The pupils she taught, the teachers she worked with, the superstitious headmaster she clashed with. Her lifetime spent teaching revealed itself in her intense focus, her immense patience, her careful way of attending to a child's endless question. Why worship them? The same reason people fear them, because they are powerful. But worship would be just as dangerous to us as violence, perhaps more so. I don't want you to be imprisoned in a temple. Here at least they fear a different god, though I don't like to use that word. Why not? It's too easy to place power on a pedestal. Certainly Leviathans swim above, and we will never truly know them, but it is cruel to burden anything with godhood. We don't call the Prospero gods, or the deep folk that can't live on land, and they don't think of humans as gods either. Esther, do you understand why it's safer here? I do not. Because they do not fear the oversea here. The Prospero care only for their god. And if we are courteous guests, we will not offend them too much merely by being here and being strange. Remember what I've told you, but please, you must know never to speak against their god. I understand. I'm glad. You are old enough to think for yourself and to keep certain thoughts to yourself. You don't have to share their beliefs, but we need to coexist. It struck you even then that she would not have had to leave her life behind, if not for you. Did I do something wrong to be born like this? No, my love, absolutely not. Never let anyone tell you that. Let no one make you believe you're wrong or unholy, or holy at all. You are a human being. You are a child and you did nothing wrong. The conviction in her voice steadied you as much as her embrace. She took you in her arms, and you laid your head on her shoulders as she smoothed her palm across your back. Against her unbound hair, you whispered, "Did you?" "No, I did what I felt right." The memory of her embrace even now has begun to fade. You know that you will never feel it again. Her voice and her conviction are gone. Her patience, her focus, her expertise, it is all gone and buried, rotting away in the garden, in paradise or parasites. No matter what you say, she cannot hear you, but still I will say, I love you. If you were born merely ill and gaunt, yet ordinary, it might have been overlooked with only a smear of revulsion. But you were born an ill omen, and there is neither cure nor sympathy for that. Human superstition was too cruel, and so Deirdre sought out other beings. She found Achtovan, if not welcoming, then tolerant. Once others lived here, sea guides and cove dwellers, deep folk whose part human offspring frolicked with you when you were small. You don't know why you were allowed to stay. Certainly not pity, but perhaps some unbalanced largesse, some generosity to hold over your heads. After some years, the others moved on. Only Deirdre and her, I can have bright-eyed or curse-rotted. I'm going with bright-eyed child remained in Achtovan's charming menagerie. And now, she is gone. You are the last of the Prospero's idly kept pets, and you are fast losing any charm you once possessed. They will never love you. But someone once did. Once more, you think of your mother's final missive, her carefully chosen last words to you. You live as you do because something else died. You live with it haunting your blood, writhing between your ribs, begging to emerge. What it is, you don't know. Who it was, even your mother never knew, but it is as much a part of you as she is. Even now you feel it, for the first time not as something foreign, but something intrinsic. It is buried so deep within you that its every wretched movement is agony. You are still not ready to be alone with yourself, or with this part of you. You cannot afford to stay in bed any longer. As the light spreads in, cobwebs glint in the rafters, and you think of the mute spiderlings serving everywhere as her emissaries. You know that your dream was an unholy one, an act of blasphemy, and if your blessing, or curse, whatever it may be, is more than an imagined agony, then your existence may be blasphemy as well. The god in the garden does not recognize those who reign in the sea above, and neither should you as its pontiff. Relentless as usual, duty calls. Your obligation for the day is to return to the ship at her behest. Despite your disorientation, you dress quickly and set out for the harbor. As before, the ship looms at the furthest point of the harbor, rocking gently on the water. The boarding plank is down, welcoming as a battered old galleon can be, and you hesitate a moment before ascending uninvited. But the captain spots you from above and ushers you on board. As you embark, they sweep into a bow, doffing their tattered hat. Hello again, good Pontiff. To what do we owe the pleasure of another audience? The pleasure is mine. We could argue about that for hours, I expect. You really are one of the more pleasant envoys of recent memory. But my hands are only free for the moment. Anything I can help you with? Where did you come from? Oh, all over. We picked the one called Leech up about 2 weeks ago, west of here. We passed by here a month prior, as you must know, but weren't given leave to dock. It worked out nicely, actually. We might not have found poor Leech otherwise. Is that all? I am totally going to ask, are you human? I'll level with you. I don't remember. Does it matter? Not much that I've found. It's a big world, Esser, and human experience is not at all universal. My, maybe I should have been a philosopher. So, will that be all? The world has never felt big to you, never seemed vast or open the way it must to a sea captain. All the same, their words run a cold finger down your spine. It's a weird caress of hope, both uncomfortable to hear and desperately longed for. Does it matter? Not much. Should it? Perhaps not at all. So yes, thank you. Suit yourself. Look around to your heart's content. Hell, go below decks if you'd like. I'll be in my quarters. I hate to be a poor host, but Felocial has always outdone me in that respect anyway, and I have some long overdue letters to write. It's a genial enough excuse, but you think you have unraveled their meaning well enough. The captain trusts you, and they have nothing to hide. You are welcome anywhere, not because they like you, but because it benefits them to say so, and you've given them nothing to fear. They could like you without trusting you, or trust you without liking you. But they do seem to like you for whatever reason. It's a change of pace, but not an unwelcome one. Taj Jud has retired elsewhere, leaving you to explore the ship at your leisure. You find yourself feeling more familiar with its layout, but much of it is still entirely foreign to you. You have not been on a boat since you were an infant. Here and there, crew members busy themselves with cargo and other matters of maintenance. Some you recognize, others you've never seen before. Well, let's go examine the berth. The captain invited you to venture below decks, perhaps as a show of faith, to demonstrate that your presence is no intrusion. Even so, you don't wish to stray too far or too deep into the ship's innards. Already, the cramped quarters sets you on edge. Descending a short ladder, you find yourself in a small hallway. Despite the lack of room, there is a rustic coziness to the place, a sense of security granted by the ship's hardy structure. It is well and warmly lit. It is dry. It is clean. This is a lived-in vessel, but clearly cared for with some diligence even to this day. At the end of the hall, an individual sits in repose, hunched over what appears to be a firearm they've busied themselves servicing. As you approach, they shrug off their fur cape, glancing upward to regard you. Offering no smile, no welcome, they say nothing until you are close enough that your boot nearly brushes theirs. Their eyes strike you, a dull gray, dotted through with masses of honey yellow that seem to undulate softly. Can I assist you in any manner? I am Lieutenant Ponomarenko. However, feel free to call me Matya, should it please you. What brings you to Achtoven? Our ship has come to your isle in order to deliver a passenger. I trust your ward has been accounted for. Their voice is far more accented than the others, thick and heavy, words soft in all the wrong places. Yet it is not unpleasant, not inviting. Yes, but I meant you specifically. Myself, I go wherever the captain goes. There is no particular reason why I personally have arrived to your isle. That you can understand. Everything you have done for the last few days has been done purely out of obligation, or by mistake. Perhaps it would be easier to merely be a ship carried by the waves. Let's see what sort of places the captain goes. Wherever the next shipment is to be taken, which sometimes becomes far-flung places such as this. Far-flung? Your gardens rest near an edge of Felocial's map, nestled and hidden. We found you by happenstance before, and Leech helped direct us here a second time. The reminder of how truly remote Achtoven is strikes you with a tightening, encroaching sadness. You wonder when, or if, another ship will come. How many months will pass? How many years? That's interesting, thank you. You glance behind you toward the towering spires of the hive and note the darkening day. The afternoon is quickly fading. With a deep bow, you inform Watia that you ought to be going, though you appreciate the information they've offered you, and you have greatly enjoyed meeting them. I do not wish to keep you from your duties, as I am certain you have many. Hound, keep your shadows safe, Esser. What a great phrase. May the garden bless yours, Lieutenant. Taj Jud has retired elsewhere to explore the ship at your leisure. All right, we will go to the stern. Making your way to the aftermost part of the galleon, you find yourself gazing out beyond the harbor. Though you strain your eyes to see the dim horizon, there are no shadows of other islands as far as the sea stretches. Achtovan is remote, homogeneous, always closing in on you. It is an uncommon destination mired in a dark corner of the sea. And yet, somewhere in the sea, diverse life is teeming and thriving. The thought taunts you. Perhaps there's another island just out of sight. Perhaps it's always been there, just beyond your reach, just far enough that you could never swim there, never see its light, never. A pair of crimson eyes has long since settled on your back. The weight of their stare is unmistakable. A tall, dark figure loiters nearby at the ship's rail. They spin around on one heel as they hear you draw close, not with fear or tension, but to form a sweeping bow. The smile they offer you is sharp, mingled by the corner in which it appears to have been torn, but there is an undeniable warmth there. Enjoying the view, I take it. Oh, but pardon my manners. Serafiel Sathamal at your service. How can I be of help? His smile grows further, red eye crinkling at the corners as he jets a hand from where it was resting beneath his cape. Even as he straightens from his bow, towering above you, you notice he slouches, just so. Perhaps an attempt to seem smaller, more demure. What brings you to Achtovan? I suppose a denizen of your island had capsized, or were they stranded? I'm afraid I don't know the details, but I am happy to return to such a beautiful place. Strangers must see only beauty, you suppose, if they are unfazed by the Prospero. The terraces are sublime, but their loveliness has come to weigh on you unpleasantly. It is too much a facade, that verdant beauty. It pulls the unsuspecting in, just as the carnivorous jungle intends. Let's be pleasant. I think that's up to debate, as are most things in life. My home is only beautiful when the oversea deigns to shine some light in Sathame's direction, which, I'll have you know, is hilariously rare. Otherwise, it's a bit of an admittedly gloomy affair. Even so, you are hungry, always hungry for tell of other places. Achtovan is all you have known for 25 years, and the sea beyond is so vast. Let's probe a little bit. What is one like you hailing from such a gloomy place? How kind! I suppose the glitz and glamour of a more advanced... Yes, that seems right. Advanced isles have worn off on me, as well as the stage, of course, and, well, the street, the bar at the edge of town, why, even this pier of yours. All is but a stage for a performer, a magician, such as myself. One must always have a smile, after all. I do not suppose so, so I will ask if he's a magician. I pull coins from ears, make cards disappear, and have flowers bloom in their place. Those little sorts of delights. I must confess it isn't much good for anything, save for entertainment. If I'm not forcing my dearest friends to watch me practice, I am assisting them in loading cannons and the movement of cargo below decks. An unexpected talent, though you aren't at all certain what you expected from this man. The ship's crew seems likely to contain all manner of oddities and surprises. How marvelous. You glance behind you toward the towering spires of the hive and note the darkening day. The afternoon is quickly fading. With a deep bow, you inform Serafiel Sathamil, taking care to pronounce his full name, hopefully better than I did, that it has been a pleasure to meet him, but you ought to be going. Oh, first try, and such impeccable pronunciation. But in the future, please call on me as though I were a friend. Syrah must do. It must. It must. Safe travels, Syrah. Zaj Jud has retired elsewhere, all of that is the same, and now we are expected back at the temple. Seeing that you've made your way to disembark, Felociel spots you and leads you to the captain's quarters, giving the door a brisk knock. A clatter and a series of muffled thumps sounds from inside before Zaj Jud pokes their bandaged head outside. Esser, I take it this is goodbye again? How the time flies. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to let me know. right, thank you, Captain. As you return to the Hive Temple, it dawns on you that none of the outsiders received you with disgust or contempt, and none of them threatened you with worship. Though they are strangers, all of them more alien than the odd life you're accustomed to. It's a heartening thought. When dusk begins to settle over Achtoven, Her Excellency's secretary returns to the temple. Tonight she leaves much of her body coiled in the hall, as if anxious to enter the heavy fog of incense. Well, Pontiff, what did you make of the outsiders? Be brief. I think they are nothing to fear. Very well. That doesn't change the necessity of the harbor guards, of course, but I will report back to Her Excellency at once. Your service is appreciated. Perhaps she questions your judgment, thinks your human nature makes you biased, but you know that she cannot misrepresent your words to Her Excellency. She can smell lies, it said. Though Miria holds herself to a professional decorum as she exits the temple, you can tell that the incense is repellent to her on an instinctive level. You remember Aprakrita explaining it long ago, that although the Prospero are naturally averse to smoke and certain aromas, their god favors heady smoke and cloying smells. Its devotees must endure such things, not as penance, but as an act of sacrifice and love. As before, you snuff the candles and the incense, letting the temple's aromas waft out into the night freely. When the temple is dark, you set out on the short walk back to your home. Passing through one of the hive's many courtyards, you notice a shed cicada husk clinging to the bark of a tree. For a moment, it holds your attention enough to stop you in your tracks. It's no more than an empty shell, a pale, discarded exoskeleton as large as you are tall. Yet it holds its shape. But it is delicate. You have seen many in your lifetime, and you know that they crumble easily. It reminds you too much of yourself. More and more, you find yourself grappling with your own body, with your skin that does not wish to live, dying and drying and sloughing away, with your guts writhing like the holy larva, your own body a nursery for grief and suffering, with years of caution warring with the strange, lifelong yearning in your heart. And with your eyes, clear-sighted yet burdened by some otherworldly force, always flickering toward the oversea. It churns heavily today, and you lose several minutes simply watching it, imagining the immense heat and velocity of its unknowable currents. What really swims there, you wonder, not for the first time? What died to let you live? Under the surface of your skin, something ripples. You feel it beneath your face, slithering across your cheekbone, bulging under your eyelid, and in the same instant it is gone. Clutching the trunk of a gnarled tree, you sink to your knees. For a moment you cannot stand. Your bones feel rubbery and disjointed. Desperately you hope no one will find you like this. The thought is enough to make you struggle to your feet despite the searing pain that tears through your core as if in protest. Is that it? Does your body protest the life it was given? Or does it yearn for something more? What is wrong with you? I am going to deem it a blessing. Mother would not lie. If she understood it as a blessing, if the creature itself said as much, then it must be so. It cherished her kindness in its final moments and resolved to ensure that her child would live. Was that the blessing then? Is life itself a reward? Your heart hammers in your chest. You feel it beating, but is it really there? Does it take the shape a human's would? Does that matter if it's kept you alive this long? Perhaps there is something more to it, but whatever it is lies far beyond your understanding. It will take time to uncover, and you are afraid to waste any, or to rush. You cannot bear to anticipate decades of priesthood, servitude, falsehood. So you are left living day by day, hour by hour. The rest of the way home is short, but your body moves slowly, racked with pain and disquiet. You arrive restless and ill at ease, trying not to let a lifetime's worth of questions overtake you all at once. The unbearable uncertainty has become too heavy, too immense. You sit down at your desk and smooth a hand over your brow, trying to convince yourself that you are present and real, a human being, not the dregs of some blessing or curse given life as a joke. Long into the night you remain awake, hunched over your desk, letting a pen wander over scraps of torn, yellowed paper. It gives you something to do, some way to release the nervous energy that even now transmutes itself into pains radiating down your spine and through your limbs. The pen in your hand scribbles idly, inking circuitous curves, sharp angled strokes, winding serpentine marks. I like the winding serpentine marks. I like a lot of the third options in these. Inking winding serpentine marks onto the page until they coalesce into a hideous writhing mass alive in the flickering candlelight. When your candle burns too low to see by, you crumple the paper into a ball, staining your fingertips with ink, and make an attempt to retire to bed. To your most intense relief, you do not dream at all. 6. Golden Fire. And our little quote is, "Something must be done about it. A restful, dreamless sleep is too good to be true. It doesn't last longer than a few hours. As the first rays of daylight begin to snake across the room, you're roused by a many-limbed scuttling and pounding on your door. Startled, you pull on your cassock and open the door just a crack. In that fissure of light, you see groundskeeper Danaeus peering intently at you, a crowd of serving morsels assembled behind him. His demeanor is tense, severe. He says nothing as he turns away, but you know to follow him. You consider breaking the impressive silence. I'm totally going to break it and ask where we're going. First, the Sacrarium. Sacrarium. I'll need your blessing and your hands. For the Pontiff, the morsels cry, following close at your heels. Tools for the Pontiff! After your last expedition to the garden, you find yourself more than a little apprehensive to accompany Danaeus again. You do not want to attract any further attention from the thing he called God. Its curiosity, if that is indeed all it was, has already taken too great a toll on you. Arriving at the Sacrarium, the crowd of morsels shivers and disperses at Danaeus' signal. He darts inside and bids you follow. The rotting shed has no door, but you notice hinges lingering in the frame, rusted and ruined. Shafts of light filter in through broken slats in the walls, illuminating the insides of the Sacrarium dimly. Danaeus directs you to a shelf of tools best wielded by human hands, though many are rusted and worn after years of disuse. Some have been revived by the gardeners. You select a spade, a hatchet, and shears or pruning saw. A spade and a pruning saw. Outside, the 3 other members of the Synod have gathered in the courtyard. Danaeus instructs you to speak with them as he makes further preparations. They seem anxious. As you emerge from the Sacrarium, the trio regards you closely, and the intensity of their 6-eyed scrutiny begins to alarm you. I'm going to speak to the Harpactor again. Something is rotten in Actoven. Her voice is curdled with sour humor. How do you know? Believe me, I know. I'd know even if the groundskeeper hadn't lost his mind over it. The air's changed. There's a new pollen, Danaeus said. Keep with the truth, I hadn't realized. Well, nobody expected you to. You have your human limitations. You weren't made to sense these things, but you can help us solve them. I will do my best. Glad to hear it. One of your gardeners must be competent enough to figure things out. They won't let me resolve it, of course. I'm not delicate enough for the plants. Bah! You are one to talk, but you cannot imagine Harpactor being of great help in the garden. Though she reveres it as she is meant to, she does not have the patience for its curiosities. Harpactor's principles do not encourage curiosity, only action. Even so, you see that the idea of a threat to the garden is tormenting her. There's a restless quality to the way she carries herself, as if she fears an enemy she does not know how to fight. Apologies, ducks, but the matter in the garden is urgent, as you say. Permit me to borrow the Pontiff for a spell. Harpactor scoffs that she was finished with you anyway, but gives Danaeus a pointed look. Before you leave the courtyard, Danaeus directs you to a worn canvas sack filled with provisions, small planting pots, a worn loop of steel, and a chunk of flint. You stow your own tools inside and sling it over your shoulder. The trek proves steeper and more treacherous than your last outing with Danaeus, though he brings you only as far as the 3rd terrace. Many of the stone stairs along the path are broken, and while Danaeus need not concern himself with footholds, or indeed with walking at all, you must follow him carefully and swiftly despite steep inclines and decaying gaps in the walkway. With effort you manage, and though you are exhausted by the time he has led you deeper into the jungle cover of the terrace, you do all you can not to show it. Your breath trembles harshly in your throat as you struggle to catch it. The dawn has long since slipped away, and afternoon has begun to encroach on the world. At last, after a long period of terse silence, Danaeus begins to speak. I've been tending our garden about as long as you've been alive, and never have I seen any flower like this one. Perhaps it lives elsewhere in the world, but it's not meant to be here, stealing the sucker from God's soil. I trust you understand that much. You believe you get the gist. Though you are no expert, you have observed one of God's great limbs. It grew alone, commanding every nutrient from the soil for itself. Even grass hardly dared to encroach upon it. Often, the roots and limbs of Achtoven will choke out any weak invader. But sometimes a hardy foreign bloom appears, and we must intervene on God's behalf. That is the case now. Already the earth is sicker for its presence. As you follow along behind Danaeus, you watch your step closely and wonder just how deep the roots of Achtoven delve. Before long, Danaeus halts, and you stumble to a stop behind him, backing up several paces to scramble back from the ledge of a deep ravine. There, in the thrutch, do you see it? In the depth of the ravine, another limb grows listlessly. It does not look like its sibling on the fourth terrace. It does not stand upright or curl delicately or boast any growing buds, but rather seems to sag toward the earth, its brilliant color outdone by another bloom. Nestled in its roots is a small and solitary yellow flower. In fact, down there is a little yellow flower. In comparison to the limb's immensity, the plant is tiny, barely mature, but its single flower commands your attention. It bursts forth from the end of a green stem lined with long thorns. A few tightly shut buds cluster between the thorns. Though paler than the flower, they promise blooms of its same astonishing yellow. It is horrible or beautiful. I think it is beautiful. It seems so subtle, so insignificant. If you had come alone, you might not have noticed it at all. Even as you stand at the earth's edge considering what to do, the flower seems to undulate in the still air, requiring no breeze or shaft of sunlight to grow taller, thornier, more vital. Around it, the crumpled limb of God is fading, its magnificent bands of color growing dull, its twisted trunk slumped to one side as if in exhaustion. Something must be done about it, Pontiff. The yellow flower stares up at you into your own yellow eyes. My decision is to relocate it. Perhaps that could be done, for a time. It certainly can't infringe upon another terrace, but we could have it potted and studied. We ought to get to digging in any case. We must remove it from the homage site, roots and all. You crouch and begin looking through the sack of tools, procuring a small ceramic and a trowel. You are standing at the edge of the ravine at Danaeus' side, staring down at the limb of God dying within this hateful crevice of the earth, when you hear someone approaching. There are no footfalls to mark their progress, only a low, droning buzz and the papery beat of wings, growing louder as they grow nearer. You know that sound all too well. Our predecessor has returned. Leave us, Danaeus. I have business with the good Pontiff. His approach startles you enough that you drop the tools in your hands. Dimly you are aware of them tumbling downhill. You turn to Danaeus, searching his blank expression for any sign of understanding. There is very little to read in his eyes, but from the angle of his antenna, you suppose he is surprised as you are. He seems vigilant, suddenly more alert than before. Do I want him to stay? Do I have him do as he asks? Let's have him do as he asks. Yes, Pontiff. You aren't sure if he is speaking to you or to Apocrypha. In a flutter of wings, he disappears into the foliage. Though the title of Pontiff is yours now, it has belonged to Apocrypha for longer than you have been alive. He wears it like a kingly mantle, even after it was passed on to you. Without the trappings of his station, his holiness still burns like judgment, tailored for him from within. Yours is merely a hand-me-down, ill-fitting and too large. Like a child's costume, it does not suit you. Apocrypha's wings still as he lets himself touch the ground, examining the bloom with his faceted eyes. After a moment, he emits a sharp buzz, not unlike a peal of laughter. I shall see to this. Don't presume to give any more orders, Pontiff. Your word means nothing. Worse than nothing. He spits your new title like an insult. He rises again, wings beating, eyes enormous and hateful as he fixes his gaze upon you as though it were a piercing thing. Have you enjoyed your new trade, Pontiff? I will evade and say, can I help you? Give back what you took from me. Do you hate me? Shouldn't I? You took everything from me. You took my faith. You alone let your faith wither, my dude. Be silent! Apocrita launches himself forward, and he is upon you in an instant, rising into the air to position his stinger against your chest. It is as thick as your forearm, as sharp as blade. For a moment he lingers, frozen before the beating of his wings, staring down at you with murderous intent. I'm not going to fight you, dude. I'm fleeing. I know I could have punched that bee. I decided not to punch that bee. I felt like that was how I was playing, yes, sir. Grim is like, you can punch the bee! Apocrita has you backed up against the edge of the thrutch, and when you take a step backward, the ground begins to crumble beneath your feet. There is not enough time to right yourself, but you manage to turn and stagger into the ravine, feeling the tip of Apocrita's stinger gouge the back of your cassock as you go. You trip, rolling down the steep incline and into the ditch near the ailing limb and its unwelcome companion. As you struggle to right yourself, disoriented from the fall, a horrible sound drones down into the ravine. Apocrita is laughing, you realize, hovering at the edge, looking down at you and laughing as if he has witnessed the most amusing thing in the world. Interesting change to my visage. I like, Grimm's mentions, enjoying how in character I've played Esser. It's the theater kid in me. I can't help it. Run, Pontiff, as fast as those feeble human legs will carry you. Let's see who shall reach her first. His voice, bordering on hysterical, grows more distant as you run, heedless of where you're going, so long as it is away from Apocrita. Branches tear at your clothes and face and hair. The jaws of strange blooms snap at you when you near them, but you are heavier and faster than the meals they can manage to ensnare, and they don't seem to know what to make of you. As you run, an acid taste floods your mouth and your sinuses begin to ache, the pain of it throbbing through the roots of your teeth. When you press a hand to your mouth, you pull it away to find the leather of your glove seared and bubbling as if eaten by acid. Your teeth throb again. Something sharp presses against your tongue, your lower lip. Your vision swims and you pause on unsteady feet to cough and spit. It is a graceless, unholy thing to do, but you are choking. When you can breathe again, leaf litter sizzling beneath you, you break into a run once more. When the canopy above you begins to grow thinner, you come upon the broken path to the courtyard. At last, you begin your descent. Through it, though it took you all afternoon to reach the thrutch with Danaeus, your panicked descent seemed to take no time at all. When you reach the courtyard, you find no one there. No one occupies the sacrarium either, and the paths back to your dwelling are empty as well. No workers straggle along the outside of the hive. No courtiers gather in wait. The island feels empty, the air strangled and still. Dazed and in shock, you hurry home, slamming the door behind you. Just a moment you decide to collect yourself, and then you will find help. At any moment you fear Apocrita might appear outside your door, but he does not. No one does. Slowly you catch your breath. Your body revolts, doubling over in pain. Once more your limbs feel wrong and unwieldy, as if you will come apart at any moment. Eyes clenched shut, you are frozen in its thrall until the spell passes. When you recover your senses, you find that your chin and neck are sticky with drying blood. You feel for injuries, finding none, until you swallow thickly and realize you taste copper and fear. Blood drips from your nose, over your lips, down the back of your throat. You don't know why. It escaped your perception for a time, but you can no longer escape its reality, nor the reality of everything else. Exhausted, racked with pain, and pushed to your limit of exertion, you drop to the floor, unconscious. 7. Imago emerging. Only she can help you. Interesting. You come to shortly after midnight. The events of the last several hours reassert themselves like a miasma in your mind, poisonous and disorienting. Immediately, you decide that your only recourse is to seek out Her Excellency, but your body is weak with fatigue. Your hands are shaking. The idea of standing before her like this and having her stare into you strikes fear into your heart. You consider making a tincture of some sort to steady your nerves, but it will take time. I'm going to seek help quickly. They can deal with my shaking hands. The seas won't cease to churn just because you feel unwell. The world won't stop long enough for you to catch your breath. Not now, and not ever. Around every corner in the hive, you fear coming face to face with Apocrypha and his deadly stinger. You remind yourself again and again that her excellency is never far away, always watching, always listening. Somehow that does not make you feel more at ease. Only she can help you. Though you suspect that any member of the Synod might take pity on you, Apocrypha has distanced himself from them. You cannot imagine that he would listen to them now, no matter the stakes. Only she might convince him to stop, or force him if need be. A guard at her door rises to his full height and snaps his mandibles at you. State your business. You know what? Let me pass. I'm her Pontiff. I'm going to pull rank for once. The guard darts toward you, pushing his mandibles towards your face. As he begins to threaten you, her voice rings out from within the chamber. Let them pass, dear, and leave us if you will. You're dismissed. Her hearing has always been keen. Well, Pontiff, I expected you'd be proactive through this uproar. What is it that you need, Sticking with the truth. Apocrypha, except I stutter and can't seem to speak. I wonder if I can talk about the garden. It will pass. God's garden always prevails. You yourself have designed a course of action already, haven't you? The groundskeeper has just left to light the fire. You wanted so badly to tell her the truth, but the words would not leave your mouth. Apocrypha was, after all, and perhaps still is, a member of the Synod. She has trusted him and privileged him far longer than you have been alive. To accuse him could have consequences. I like, from the chat, she's here. Miss Excellency, can I have one protection as a treat? Let's point out I didn't tell him to light any fire. Then you were wrong, my dear Pontiff, and we are correcting your silly little error of judgment. Now tell me what really concerns you. I mean, other than you overriding me, I'm going to force the words out that Apocrypha attacked. Oh dear, that's unacceptable. Are you hurt, Pontiff? Her voice is cold, echoing harshly behind the screen that conceals her from view. There is no hint of surprise or amusement in her tone, only a bored sort of indulgence. Not badly, Your Excellency. That's good. I would so hate to lose you as well. I shall speak with Apocrypha about his indiscretion. Will he be punished? I haven't decided, Pontiff. He acted precipitously, yes. And what he did was a sin, of course, and we judge sins harshly. But you, too, are guilty of sin. An implication drips from her words, honey-thick and poisonous, precipitously, too soon, with too much haste, as if he were only meant to stay his stinger until the order was given someday hence. I repented, and I looked upon your heart and absolved you. Heartbreak made you foolish, but I have made you holy. I have elevated you from your animal suffering, for you are no animal. Have you ever wondered, Esser, about your true nature? Like all the time. Of course you do, you poor thing. I pity you so, being deprived for so long, suffering in uncertainty for a lifetime. Did she keep it from you? Or was there yet one thing Deirdre could not understand? Did she never learn the nature of her own spawn? When she says your mother's name, her tone seems to drip with sarcasm. It strikes you like a blow. I have a blessing. Clever child, so you've begun to understand. A blessing can be a perilous thing, of course. And you have known that peril all your life, haven't you? Yes, the peril of loneliness, of judgment, the knowledge that some will always distrust you, despise you, that you will have to defend yourself, the crushing uncertainty, the ever-present question. What blessing hurts this way? Who will ever accept me? Why? I'm going to stick with why. Most of all, what am I? What precisely? I do not know. A familiar of some Leviathan, maybe. A vessel, a drop of some wicked god's blood. Even so, you are still human, and that hobbles you. But I can taste the salt of the oversea lingering within you. Whether or not she speaks the truth, it leaves you speechless. You have come to harbor quiet suspicions, yet you did not want to consider something so immense. But Your fascination with the seas, your dreams, your melodies, if even a drop of the oversea exists within you, perhaps that is the source of your weirdness. If that is true, the water that makes you would unmake another being. If that is true, then perhaps... I have known our God well, Esser, and so I know power when I sense it. You are finally maturing, an imago emerging, growing upward, inward, toward the sea that made you. Does it hurt? I expect that it has begun to. As if to punctuate her words, a wave of pain moves through your body like maggots writhing in your gut, like sea serpents slithering, like worms feeding on a corpse. I know that you must feel it even now. You reek of it, for you have suffered the life of an abomination, something cast down and left to struggle where it does not belong. I can take your pain away, Ezra. The sinewy, saccharine tone of her voice sends a wash of coldness down your spine. I do not want that. You don't know what you want. Seems like they're all about saying what Esser wants and what Esser should feel. You're bad, Insect Mom. The screen shivers with the force of her voice, echoing so loudly in the audience chamber that it makes you flinch. Something leaks from behind the ornate wood, a rivulet of dark, thick liquid pooling in her shadow. I am going to back away. Cowardice, too, is a sin. You took a vow, Ezra. Remember that. The massive screen clatters against the wall as she forces it aside. The impact cracks the delicate, ornate wood and rings harshly against the stone, the sound of violence rising into the ceiling of the vaulted chamber. She emerges. As you turn away, you catch a flash of motion in the corner of your eye and feel something tear through the hem of your cassock as it flares out behind you. Her bladed talon only narrowly missed severing the vital tendon in the back of your leg. And there she is with that weapon plunged in her head. Her body is distended with the burden of life. You have witnessed her form before, in glimpses and glances, but it has changed since then. She is immense. She salivates from many mouths, a substance as foul as the viscous liquid that has begun to pool beneath her. It trails along as she drags herself forward, malformed wings beginning to spread in the cavernous nave at her back. They are flimsy, as if merely ornamental, radiant with iridescence and laden with gold. I have offered you greater purpose. I have offered you true divinity. I have offered you release from this pathetic fumbling of yours. Do not spurn my kindness. There will be no more pain soon, no more grief. My young will grow strong on the weakest parts of you, and you will be reborn when they've had their fill. They must have something holy to nest in, you see, something alive and sacred, and so I concentrated you. Never doubt, my dear, that you are sacred to us all. All right, I didn't see that coming, although it makes utter sense. The thought alone strikes revulsion into the deepest pit of your heart. Your guts twist with cold, heaving nausea. She means to paralyze you and feed you to her young as you lay senseless and numb, slowly eaten away by the eggs that squirm inside her, soon to emerge. She means to change you, remade in her image. She made you Pontiff only to offer her children a more wholesome meal. I mean, I've heard of blessing a meal before, but dang. There is no time to dwell on such things. There is only time for action. The lingering ache of many years of alienation, or indignity, or abuse, let's go with abuse, has become a very real agony. Like a door thrown open, a threshold crossed, you are finally disgusted enough, furious enough. So many dead bodies, so many discarded lives, and you do not want yours to lie among them. You turn and sprint for the exit. She lunges toward you with ponderous force, but you wrench the heavy doors apart and slip through the crack between them before one of her stingers or talons can catch you. In her condition, she cannot follow you. She is too heavily pregnant, too swollen and delicate to leave her chamber at all. In mere moments, the guards will be summoned. Until then, you have to run. Passing courtiers and servants will see you. Oh, I misread that. Passing courtiers and servants will see you. They will follow. If you linger, they will catch up with you. For her approval, they will do anything. For a moment, a pang of indecision strikes you as you think of the home you were so suddenly leaving behind, the grave you will never have the chance to kneel at again. But you are left with no other choice. It is life or death. You choose life. As you run, you notice the strange emptiness of the halls. Your footfalls echo horribly behind you, but it seems that there is no one around to hear them. Passing through an open-air hallway, you understand why. Achtoven is burning. Smoke drifts in massive clouds through the hewn gaps in the stone walls, and you must cover your mouth and nose with your cravat to proceed. It stings your eyes, but the exit of the hive is in sight. Beyond it, greenery looms high on the horizon, small flames licking ever higher into the canopy. As you race through the doors and emerge into the burning dawn, someone approaches you through the smoke. Esser, where are you hurrying off to? I'd say where's the fire, but it's obvious enough, isn't it? Everything went straight to hell as soon as that flower caught fire. Despite her words, Harpactor's usual irreverent tone is absent, replaced by a cold, humorless severity. Told you not to burn that thing. That damned flower burst when they lit it aflame, spread its seeds across the terrace, and ignited everything. It's some unnatural, accursed thing. The roots had already burrowed deep, and fire only seemed to fuel it. Pontiff, you're needed now more than ever. The way she says your title is hollow, like any other courtly performance. Did she tell you why? She doesn't tell me much lately. I'm just doing as I'm asked. The note of bitterness in her voice surprises you. Ordinarily, she speaks of her excellency with diligent devotion, but for a moment she sounds vulnerable, as if her excellency's aloofness is a personal betrayal. She wants to turn you into a drone. And that's so bad? Wouldn't you be better off? Think about it. It's an honor. You'd spurn that? She takes a step closer, her razor-sharp pincers twitching, her clawed limbs scraping the dirt. Wouldn't you? It's not about me. She will never ask that of me. The force of her rage, her jealousy, her incomprehensible heartbreak, it sends you reeling, and you scramble several steps backward. Ordinarily eager to solve any conflict swiftly with her immense strength, Harpactor seems frozen, if only for a moment. She digs her tarsi into the earth, limbs buckling and seethes. I am going to try to talk, even though this may be the most foolish thing I've ever done. God damn you! God damn you! Well, it already has. May you live then. Live and suffer. Live in filth and sorrow like you were meant to, snake that you are. Go and gulp down the salt of the sea. See if it keeps you from burning. She turns her back to you and remains still, waiting for you to leave. You want to say something, but you don't know what remains to be said. You know that Harpactor wouldn't want you to thank her. You know she wouldn't accept an apology. You run and keep running. Overgrown vines along the broken paths and empty causeways nearly ensnare you, but some feral instinct within you keeps you on your feet and struggling, striving away from the hive. The harbor is not far, and you hear no one pursuing you. All you hear is the roar of the flames, worsening as they spread beyond the terraces. The Prospero have more pressing troubles now than finding you. A backward glance confirms that the inferno surely must impede them. For a moment, the sight of the yellow flower flashes into your mind's eye, and you can hardly imagine such a tiny bloom wreaking such terrible havoc. Your breath is harsh as glass in your throat, your muscles so cramped that you are ready to double over. But you cannot stop now. You will always have your own voice, your mother once told you. It is building in your chest now, a scream being strangled as you run, a scream of pain and fear and grief coiled inside you and waiting to strike. But now is not the time. There will be time for that later if you survive. This isn't forever, your mother used to say, a hopeful reminder. One day when you're older, there will be another ship for us, another home. As you grew up, there was always some insurmountable future when you'd finally be free to face the world. Now you are grown. You are old enough to understand, old enough to defend yourself, old enough to know that you cannot live like this. You know you cannot stay here any longer, and you know of a ship. Behind you, the flames tower higher. The smoke grows thicker. On the steep thoroughfare, morsels stream past you, and toward the commotion, fearing so much for the garden's well-being that they are heedless of your presence. Zaz-Jud's ship still lingers in the harbor, casting its long shadow over you as you begin to lose momentum, legs and lungs burning. Her Excellency granted the ship only 3 days in the harbor. The third is dawning. Soon they will depart. Already you see crew members readying cargo and preparing the sails. A shout in the distance catches your attention, a familiar voice calling to you from afar. "Ahoy there, Esser! What's going on?" Already you feel weak. The adrenaline is wicking away, leaving a bone-deep, numb exhaustion, and whatever has waged a war within you all your life is railing against your fatigue now. The salt of the sea, the blood of the creature that blessed you, it won't allow you to succumb. Your head aches, but there is ringing clarity in your mind now. Can I come with you? The more the merrier, I say. I think even you, good Pontiff, have overstayed your welcome. It just so happens that we've come to the same conclusion ourselves. Come aboard then, quickly now. It is a bold question, one you would not have imagined yourself asking until now. Even after the plea exits your lips, you begin to apologize, to protest that you can't pay, but the captain holds a bandaged hand to silence you. Their unquestioning kindness seizes you and pins you in place. Your head swims, wondering why. Why a stranger would offer you asylum. Whether they plan to kill you or harm you or use you like she does. But then Leech rushes to meet you and you remember. They saved him as well. What in God's name happened? Of course, no one in the harbor knows. He must have seen the morsels fleeing before he ever saw the flames. He knows nothing of the faith, of the flowers, and you envy his ignorance. You envy his easy way of coming and going, his erratic voyages impeded by the sea instead of the earth. If you turn back to the burning earth now, you will crumble. I am just going to accept his outstretched hand and say, we need to leave. I think we all agree with you there. This is no time to stand around gawking. He finishes his sentence hastily, but you can think of other ways it might have ended, ways you might have finished it for him. This is a nightmare. This is my fault. This is a blessing in disguise. This is a tragedy. It is too much to bear. A piercing whistle cuts through the air, and you glance up at Zaj, commanding the crew's attention. Leech ushers you to the ship, where the crew are waiting to help you aboard. You remember their names and faces, but in the blur of exhilaration and fear and despair, you can only focus on the captain. Zaj extends a hand wrapped tightly in bandages, and you find yourself grasping it without hesitation as they help you onto the deck. Yes, I think it's well past time we leave. I only like to watch tragedies play out on stage, and even then, it's a bit much for me. I can't bear this much longer, but you'll not have to bear it alone. Welcome aboard, Pontiff Esser. Just Esser, please. Of course. You are safe here, Esser. I give you my word. The captain releases your hand, and by the warmth in their voice, you suspect they are smiling some unseen smile beneath their bandages. They give their dark glasses a shove before turning to the assembled crew. Now I shall be goddamned if we linger here long enough to catch fire. Felocial, let's be off. The ship rumbles to life as if the body of a great beast were shifting underfoot, and you stumble, clutching at the ship's rail for purchase. Some deep, powerful engine shudders in its depths, concealed well beneath its rustic trappings. Crew members rush to their duties, and Zaj themselves tips their tattered hat to you as they dash to the helm and seize the wheel. As you sit frozen watching the flames devour Achtovan, a heavy weight drapes over your back. Seraphiel's cape, offered for warmth. Soon after, Machia approaches you with a bag of medicinal supplies, but you assure them that you are not injured. They nod, glancing toward the flames with gold-flecked gray eyes. When you glance around, you notice that Felocial remains near, as if to keep an eye on you. Above, Volquois gazes down with fear and sympathy, startling and stretching his mouth into a toothy, sheepish smile when you look up at him. On board, duties proceed around you, the moving of cargo, the adjustment of sails, hushed interactions, and shared glances. Silently, Leech comes to stand at the ship's rail beside you. For a moment he watches his livelihood burn, but before long he turns on his heel and retreats without a word to busy himself with the cargo. Sinking to your knees, you watch as Achtovan recedes swiftly before your eyes. It all loses focus as the ship gains momentum. The cobblestones of the harbor, the spires of the hive, the leaning bell tower that cast its shadow upon the home your mother made, the grave where she rests, the home you had to flee. Soon, Achtovan is only a smeared conflagration in the distance. After so many years confined to the island, you have never before imagined what it would look like from afar. But even in its destruction, it is beautiful. The garden seethes beneath the flames. The god, I think a monster's dying throes, painted in emerald and ochre. Smoke rises above it, curling tendrils, reaching for the oversea. Saltwater swirls beneath you and above you, oceans of tears, and everywhere the smell of sorrow. When Achtovan is little more than a burning star on the horizon, you still cannot tear your gaze from it. When it flickers out of view, you go on staring. The ship adjusts its course, turning away from the endless waters that could not quench Achtovan's flames. Within your line of sight, well and truly broken, you turn your gaze overhead and stare up at the churning oversea, looking for guidance and finding none. It is deep and dark and endless as death. Slowly you rise to your feet. It is all gone. This too you will mourn. You have already begun to feel the absence of the only home you have ever known, the only teachers and peers you have ever had, the only life you have ever lived. But you have mourned so much this last month. In the last week alone you have shed skin and blood and tears. You have shed so very many tears. The future sprawls out before you in wave after relentless wave, and you face it dry-eyed. You have no more tears to spare. The world awaits you. Well, that was super delightful. I loved the richness of the writing in the imagined world. I loved the thematic elements going through it. It was just a real delight. So thank you very much for coming on this journey with me and Esser, and I will see you next week.